No, go tomorrow.
Hi, Stacy.
Hey everyone. Whoops, I'm on too many devices. Hey Candace, are you on?
I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, so my laptop video is broken, so I'm trying to be on video on phone, and then I'll manage everything from laptop. But do you think you could let my laptop in the room? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, there you go. So which one do you want me to make co-host, your laptop?
The laptop, please. Yes, the one that just came in.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, and hi everyone else. Okay, I see colleagues, panel.
Counselor, I'll send you the order of council arrivals as well.
Okay,
I'll send
that
you
would be
a
great.
message.
And okay, and let me just double check who we are expecting for various panels, and then we can dive in.
Annalise, come get Toby. Hey.
Okay, I have my panel list, so let me just double check. Is Mr. Elisa on? I don't see him on yet.
He has not arrived yet, Counselor.
Okay, perfect. Is Council President on? Let me see.
No, not at this
Not yet.
time.
Okay, all right. So we'll wait a minute for our co-sponsor anyway, the lead sponsor. Okay, I'm just gonna ping Madam President to see what her ETA might be.
Counselor Wu, can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Councilor Mejia.
Hello. I'm just wondering, will you be taking public testimony first? What do you know what the plan is? How are you facilitating this?
So I had some instructions from Madam President, who says she's having trouble with the link. Okay, hopefully we'll resolve that. But I know at least from her office, the feedback was that we wanted to have at least two of the panelists who are community members speak first. And then I know I'm told Fernando had said some of the administration folks have a time constraint. So I think we will try to do, at least in terms of the panel, Mr. Elisa, Miss La Negra, and then Chief Osgood, Chief Crockett, Chief Cook. And then let me just double check. We have another panel of Dwayne, Becca, Stacy, Ken, and Yvonne in terms of advocates and community groups. So those are the panelists scheduled to be part of this. And then I'm seeing also in the attendee or / public testimony room, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
10,
9. Yeah. I think
11,
it looks like 10 people, but 9
12.
who are not panelists.
Okay. So, okay. I'm just curious about just the way things flow, but yeah.
Yeah. Why don't I think, hold on. Let's see if, okay, hold on. Let me send her the link. And then we can get going. I would like to take at least a few before the panels, just so folks don't have to wait for
Wait
so long.
until eternity to be heard.
Exactly. Okay, I'm sending the link, so hopefully she'll be on soon.
Becca, you should just get a job here. You're always here.
Yesterday was a long one.
Yeah. Buckle up. It's gonna be a long one too, just so you know. And I see our friend Stacy too.
Yeah, Becca took the last meeting for me, so I'm here to stick it out for her tonight.
Okay.
Oh, okay, Madam Prez, let me see. You're on. I don't see you. Are you in the room already? Oh, okay, got it. Okay, so all the sponsors are here. Then let's dive in and we will get started. And then I'll outline the flow a little bit more as we get into it too. Okay, Candace, are we good to go on your end?
We are good to go. We are live and recording.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome to the, oh, okay, hold on. Sorry, I need to get my actual script up on my phone as well. Welcome to the City Council's hearing on docket number 0984, the Melnia Cass Boulevard Project Design Review. This hearing is being held in the Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation. And for the record, my name is Michelle Wu, City Councilor at Large, and I have the honor of chairing this committee. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov. It will also be rebroadcast on Comcast Channel 8, RCN 82, Verizon 964, and we will take public testimony throughout the hearing. If you wish to testify by virtual testimony, please email cora.montrond@boston.gov for the link. That's Cora, CORA.MONTROND@boston.gov for the link. You may also submit written testimony by emailing ccc.plan.dev@boston.gov. So again, docket number 0984 has been sponsored by Council President Kim Janey, Councilor Julia Mejia, and myself. And we are joined by colleagues in order of arrival. Councilor Ed Flynn, Councilor Liz Braden, Councilor Matt O'Malley, and Councilor Anissa Sabi George. So the flow of today, we have many folks who are scheduled to participate as panelists and as members of the public who wish to testify. So we'll try to move through as quickly as possible, and I will be keeping time. So both panelists and folks offering testimony could keep it relatively concise. We will start with opening statements from colleagues, and feel free, colleagues, if you just want to say hello and waive the bulk of it, we would appreciate the brevity very much. And then once colleagues have given statements, we will go to a few members of the public for public testimony. I think let's plan to do 4 or 5 members of the public. And then we'll go to our panel, our first panel, which will include 2 community members and 3 administration folks. Then the rest of public testimony, assuming it stays in this list of about 4 or 5 people. And then our second community panel. And Candace is flagging for me that we also have some video testimony that we will try to play at the end if that works as well. Okay, so let's start with the sponsors. Council President Kim Janey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
I apologize for no video. I'm running behind schedule. I'm out and about and will be settled soon so that I can give my all to this hearing. I want to thank you and Councilor Mejia for your partnership on this important issue. I want to thank the many advocates in this space. I also want to thank you as the chair of this committee, Councillor Wu, for being very accommodating and thinking outside of the box and allowing us to set the stage with community members who will open up first before we hear from the administration. I really appreciate that. This is an important issue. It's an environmental justice issue, which makes it a racial justice issue. And we know the history in our city, particularly in this corridor, when we're thinking about Melnia Cass Boulevard and why we even have this boulevard. And it was because we had to fill up where they had tore down houses and homes to make way for a highway that the community was successful in fighting against. And so it's with the context of that history that we need to make sure that we're not repeating those same mistakes. Again, I want to keep my comments brief, hear from my colleagues, the esteemed panels, and those who are waiting to testify in the public. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you again for your partnership. And thank you, Councilor Mejia, for your partnership.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilor Mejia.
Yes. Thank you to the chair, and thank you to my co-sponsor and sister in service, President Council Janey, for calling this hearing. When we heard the original plan for Melina Cass Boulevard would remove 124 trees, it felt all too familiar of a feeling that our community was being designed around us and not with us. And while we appreciate the commitment on behalf of the city to reevaluate the proposal, building and maintaining trust in the community is hard to build and easy to lose. We need to be doing all that we can to lead with the people and put them in the power to design what they know is best for them. I'm hoping that this hearing will serve as a safe space for community to speak truth to power and hold us accountable to their needs. And I will also say that I really do appreciate the whole idea of leading with those who are living the realities and creating space for us to center this conversation on community voices. I always walk into every room or Zoom nowadays, and I like to see who's in it and who's not. And so I am really happy to know that we're going to be leading with those who are most impacted by this conversation, and also creating an opportunity for them to pose their own questions to the administration. So hoping that that can happen as well. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Wu. Councilor Wu, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Wu, President Janey, Councilor Mejia, for sponsoring this hearing. I know that these trees are important to many residents because these trees are not only beautiful and make our landscape beautiful as well, but having a healthy tree canopy is good for our environment, our water quality, our air quality, and our public health, critical issues. I know that there are other issues, and I just want to recognize that this is also an environmental justice issue. I have worked closely in the past several years with Chief Cook on many of these issues, and I know he'll be speaking, so I wanted to acknowledge the work of Chris Cook. So I'm interested in learning more about the design project plans and where it stands, and I'm looking forward to hearing feedback from residents. Thank you to my city councilor colleagues and to the administration team that's here, to the panelists and to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Braden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the makers for this very important hearing on. I echo Councillor Flynn's remarks about the importance of tree canopy. It is an environmental justice issue. It is a public health issue. And I look forward to hearing the discussion this afternoon. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braden. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be on the Zoom with you. Thank you to the makers for their leadership in this space. Like every colleague has said, I remain very concerned about some of the aspects of the proposal. I have long been called a tree hugger, long before it was en vogue, and I take that wear that title very proudly. I've done some great work, in all due modesty, on this body as it relates to expanding the tree canopy. Now, Congresswoman, former Councilor Presley, and I did a number of hearings on expanding the tree canopy in the city of Boston. So this seems to run in direct conflict of that. So obviously, we understand there's an opportunity for redesign, for safe streets, for infrastructure that's going to accommodate multimodal aspects. But the trees, it ought not be one versus the other. We can and we really ought to be striving for both here. So look forward to the work and hearing from members of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Malley. And Councilor Asabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the makers for bringing this before the body, as it's a really important discussion for us to participate in and play a role in, to amplify and support the voices of those in the community that feel so strong about protecting Milnea's trees and that corridor. So looking forward to today's hearing and the testimony from both the panelists and the public. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, let me just double check to make sure we didn't miss any other colleagues who have joined. Okay, I think that looks good. I do want to mention as well that Councilors Campbell and Bach both sent in letters that they wish to have read into the record. So first from Councilor Campbell, dear Chair and colleagues, I regretfully cannot attend today's hearing on docket 0984. Please extend my thanks to the sponsors for calling such a timely and important conversation on how the city can and must ensure that we're using a health equity lens, environmental justice lens in all neighborhood development or redesign. I will be ably represented by a member of my staff at today's hearing and look forward to reviewing today's hearing recording and committee report and working with the committee on any recommended next steps. Sincerely, Councilor Andrea Campbell. And then also, sorry, so many screens. From Councilor Kenzie Bach. Dear Councilor, I regret that I'm unable to join today's Planning, Development, and Transportation hearing on the Milnea-Cass Boulevard design due to a family obligation. Please convey my thanks to the many community advocates who have reached out on this issue. I share their passion for mature trees and their concerns about the need for a more deeply consultative process. I'm also grateful for Council President Janey's leadership on this issue as a District 7 councilor. I will have staff take notes on this hearing and will also review the tape myself. All best wishes for a productive hearing. Sincerely, Councilor Bach. Okay, at this point, we will take 5 members of the public for public testimony and then into our panel, our first panel. And then again, there will be more public testimony than our second panel. So I'll announce the order of the names. And Candace, could you please help me make sure everybody is let into the appropriate Zoom room? So first will be Jennifer Rose Wood, then Sarah Freeman, Stacy Rubin, Caroline Toth, and David Meshulam. And again, if everyone who is testifying could please limit yourself to 2 minutes, I will time you, and please introduce yourself and your residence for the record and any affiliation you wish to share. Okay, let's see if Jennifer is, yep, I see Jennifer, great.
Hi.
Please go ahead.
Thanks so much, Councilor Wu, and thank you to President Janey and Councilors Mahian for your support of this critical issue. I also want to thank the Friends of Milnea-Cass group and neighbors who have shown leadership and advocacy. I come to you as a concerned resident, and I live on Thornton Street, just mere blocks away from the boulevard. And I'm strongly opposed to this project, and I think it needs to be restarted from the beginning. Roxbury has some of the highest recorded temperatures in the city. And we saw multiple heat waves this summer with just really extreme and dangerously high temperatures. And as many of the councilors mentioned, we are an environmental justice neighborhood and we're a heat island. We need more trees. We need more trees being planted right now. We don't need trees being cut down. I also come to you as a concerned parent. Because of the extreme weather this summer, there were many days where I could not take my children outside. We were prisoners of the extreme temperature. Our city has elevated rates of asthma. 1 in 8 children in Boston have asthma. I want including many of the children at my children's school, the Nathan Hale, right here in Roxbury. I want my children and their friends and their classmates to be able to go outside and play in the summer. I don't want them to be stuck inside, fearing for their health and safety. Finally, I come to you as a concerned resident of planet Earth. The past 10 years have been the warmest on record. We need to be taking immediate, urgent action. We cannot afford to be losing these resources that are a hedge against literally our future and life on the planet. And I think that you have heard this before, but I need to say it again. I know I know nobody in my neighborhood who supports this project or understands the rationale for it. And to me, that speaks of a very flawed process where the people for whom this project is supposedly designed have no wish to see it carried out. So I really thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah Freeman? And again, sorry, I'm going to set my alarm. So when you hear that sound, that means 2 minutes is up. Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I live in JP, but I'm a tree hugger and a bike advocate and safe transportation advocate citywide. So I wrote a letter. I'm kind of new to this issue. I've heard about it for years, but wrote a letter back in mid-July to Mayor Walsh and CC'd a few of you. I'm going to read as far as I can get in the time allowed. As Boston is facing a heat wave this weekend, I'm writing to ask you to think seriously about the Melnia Cass Boulevard design project. Is this really the best that we can do? It doesn't seem fair that bicyclists, pedestrians, and trees must compete for the little space that's left over after the polluting motor vehicles get all the space that they need. Can't we find a way to provide bicycle facilities and protect mature trees? It's my understanding that this project involves cutting down 121 trees and that the roots of another 249 will be cut, impacting their health and likely shortening their lives. Losing these trees would have serious negative environmental, economic, and public health impacts on this majority Black and Latinx community. While I was writing this message, I received an alert that the mayor had declared a heat emergency on Sunday and Monday. People will use more air conditioners, receiving short-term relief, but exacerbating the problem. Trees reduce the need for air conditioning, and mature trees are more beneficial than young trees, which take many years to reach maturity if they survive to reach maturity. As trees age, their climate benefit grows. Years ago, when this project started, perhaps the decision makers didn't anticipate the increased severity of climate change or the increased awareness of environmental justice and social
Thank you,
justice.
Sarah.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And yeah, and we'll make sure that letter is fully into the record as well. Thank you. Stacy? Can everyone hear when the alarm goes off on my phone or no? No?
I heard
okay.
it.
Oh, okay, great. I'll try to flag both ways then. Stacy, please go ahead.
Councilors Wu, Mejia, and Janey, thank you so much for convening this hearing. My name is Stacy Rubin, and I am a senior attorney at Conservation Law Foundation. I request that the city complete 3 actions relating to this project. First, comply with state law by conducting the proper process to investigate the planned tree removal at the boulevard. Number 2 is to address the climate resiliency needs of the Melnia Cass Boulevard neighborhood. And 3 is to engage in an effective and required process that recognizes that this is both an environmental justice and civil rights issue. First, on the tree removal requirement, my colleagues and I sent a letter to the city's Parks and Recreation Commissioner and Law Department explaining the requirement to comply with the public shade tree law. The law requires the city to hold a public hearing describing each and every tree that is planned for removal. To date, the city has not done so. In addition to the public hearing, the tree warden must approve any such removal in writing. Since the impact of every living tree removed will be so great, it is critical for the city to provide residents the opportunity to voice their concerns at this legally required hearing. Secondly, the city's climate resiliency policies require addressing the urban heat island effect in Roxbury. The city itself has estimated that by 2050, the average summer temperature may be as high as 76 degrees, which is up from 69 degrees. And in particular, Roxbury has some of the hottest temperatures in the city. We know that 34% of Roxbury residents are dealing with a medical illness and may have symptoms worsened by the physical stress of a heat wave. And third, I recommend that the city engage in a collaborative process with residents, community-based organizations, and other stakeholders on a revised project design. Conservation Law Foundation stands in solidarity with Roxbury leaders in urging the city and the State Department of Transportation to respond to the community concerns. We can congratulate the Friends of Melnia Cass Boulevard, Speak for the Trees, ACE, neighborhood associations, and others who have worked so hard to grow and sustain this effort. It's time for decision makers to comply with the law, listen to residents, and address community concerns about tree removal, public health, and EJ. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacy. Caroline.
Hi, my name is Caroline Toth Bernstein. I live in Lower Roxbury. I lived here for 17 years. I live here with my son and my husband. So I'm going to pose a couple questions. One is in the 1930s, when the federal government and the maps redlined Lower Roxbury, was it systematic racism? I would argue yes. Academically, yes, is the answer to that question. In the 1960s, when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts bulldozed the homes and businesses owned by people of color in Lower Roxbury, was it systematic racism? Yes. In 2020, today, when the city of Boston proposes to destroy and damage hundreds of mature trees in Lower Roxbury, is it systematic racism once again? I would argue emphatically yes. Studies show formerly redlined neighborhoods have less tree cover, are often heat islands. The residents have greater social vulnerability. They also show these once redlined neighborhoods suffer not only from reduced wealth and greater poverty, but from lower life expectancy and higher incidence of chronic disease. The lingering impact of redlining remains in Lower Roxbury today. This tree canopy of Lower Roxbury is a community resource. It's a vital asset. The community deserves these trees and more of them. They're entitled to the benefits these trees provide. The idea that the city would take these trees from here now is unconscionable. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Okay, great job staying within time. We'll need to reset the timer before the alarm goes off. And last but not least for this round, David.
Thank you, Counselor, and thank you all the counselors for holding this meeting, and nice to see the chiefs here. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you our concerns. My name is David Meshulam. A couple of years ago, I founded a new nonprofit in Boston called Speak for the Trees Boston. And for the past 2 years, we've been working closely with Friends of Melnia Cass Boulevard. And I want to make sure that we recognize that it's their effort and their concerns that for the past decade has made sure that this is an issue that is front and center. They've attended public meetings, they've collected information, and they have been advocating day in and day out for these trees. And for the past several months, the community work around this advocacy have grown. We set out a petition that received over 13,000 signatories in 20 organizations demanding that these trees be saved. In the process, it's fair to say, I think, that we've made new friendships and increased the sense of community and belonging across the neighborhood and between organizations. One that harkens back to the People Before Highways movement of the 1960s, a movement that led to the planting of these very trees in 1981. Our work together has been a lesson in democracy and community building during a time of pandemic and of racial reckoning. And it hasn't been smooth sailing, even internally, but I'm proud to say that our conversations have been powerful, and they've been a testament to the important, slow community work that is required to build consensus and trust. I look back at my notes from May when I last spoke to the city councilors, and I had the honor to speak about the subject of Boston Parks and Recs Department's budget request for FY 2021, specifically the urban forest plan. And I commended the administration for taking bold action in thinking about climate change and in recognizing the importance of protecting and growing Boston's urban forest. Looking back at my notes, I called for an approach that was guided by 4 root values. Yes.
Can you summarize that? That was time.
Yes,
Thank you.
I called for it to be holistic, comprehensive, community-driven, and data-rich. And in this process, I see none of those bearing out, and I urge the city to reconsider the plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And apologies again, everyone, about trying to just keep us along, because I know we have a lot of folks we really want to hear from, want to respect everyone's time. So at this point, let me do a quick sweep to see if any other colleagues have joined us. No, okay, I think we're good to dive in. So we'll hear from Mr. Luis Elisa, Ms. Nina La Negra, and then our administration representatives in one panel together. Mr. Elisa.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman Wu, and thank you, President Janey, and the other councilors who've taken the time and the opportunity to allow us to voice our concerns and opinions relative to this very important situation that is existing within our community. First, my name is Luis Elisa. I'm the president of the Garrison Trotter Neighborhood Association, organization that's been around for 43 years in the community of Roxbury in general. But we're also part of the Roxbury United Neighbors Run, and we're working with groups from the lower Roxbury all the way up through Dorchester. I'm also one of the founding members and former president of the Franklin Park Coalition. So my relationship with the trees and parks go back a very long time. Matter of fact, it goes back so far that as an EPA fellow in graduate school, one of my concerns was the environment and how to improve urban environments, given the situations that we were experiencing then regarding the changing of housing and homes, and an increase in highways and things that were taking place in the predominantly African-American communities throughout the state, the city, and the nation. My concerns run very deep to the extent that we keep trying to refine this or define this situation with Melnia Cass as an issue that's for Roxbury. It's not a Roxbury issue, it's an environmental issue. It's an environmental resiliency issue, it's an environmental protection issue that affects all of Boston. While I live on Cedar Street, my concerns and activities take me through Melnia Cass on a regular basis. My church is only 3 blocks away from that intersection. And I can tell you that anyone who doesn't pay attention to the fact that tree canopy and having the ability to absorb the carbon monoxide and other particulates that are spewed into the air coming off a major highway are not paying attention, or not very much aware of what the impact of vehicle pollution and emissions are on society as a whole. Without the tree canopy that's on Melnia Cass that absorbs a lot of the traffic that makes its way from the Route 93 across Mass Avenue down to Tremont Street, they don't understand that pollution, if it was not being captured by the tree canopy, would be dispersed in the communities throughout the city. It would go into the environment, and it has such deleterious effects on the quality of life, and it affects the healthcare of people in the immediate area, but in general throughout the city of Boston. So I urge people to look at the situation that we're facing here on Melnia Cass. Our efforts and attempts to save the 125 trees that have been proposed to be cut down, for whatever purpose. It doesn't seem to make sense when I looked at the plan. And the trees that would be affected if they did do this plan, it would not be in the benefit of the residents of the city of Boston, but have the most deleterious impacts and effects on the people who are adjacent to that plan and adjacent to Melnea Cass. I therefore ask that the city councils will talk with the people from the Parks Department, with the commissioner, will talk with the tree warden and anybody else who's been in support of this plan, and ask them, did they think this thing through? Did they do an environmental impact study? Do they really understand the impacts of removing the tree canopy in an area where you have so much pollution coming from so many cars that come through this community? And do they know what the long-term effects would be? And I guarantee that if they take the time to do a comprehensive study and analysis of what this process will be in a community adjacent, but for the community of Boston in general, they might want to rethink the design. The other part is that being a part of the Franklin Park Coalition and Garrison Trotter and a number of organizations, and particularly a number of churches in the area, we all call on the city of Boston to be more mindful and more respectful of the needs and concerns of the residents of this area, because we want to be planned with and not just planned for. There's enough intelligence and enough communications and skills within our community that we can work with the Parks Department, we can work with the city of Boston, and we can work with the state. I dare say that a lot of people making decisions that are going to affect the quality of life of residents of Boston don't live here in Boston. I believe the Department of Transportation has failed in many ways to take in the concerns of the people who live in Boston for a lot of the projects they have done. But this seems the most supercilious of them all, because the destroying of this many trees in a community that has this much traffic means they did not give any real consideration to what they were proposing to do and what the long-term impacts would be. I would say to the city of Boston that they can say to their colleagues at the state level that they need to take a moment, stop, take a knee, and reconsider and think ahead as to what would happen, the damage that they would cause to the environmental health and the immediate stochastic health of all those involved in the community around them. So therefore, I ask that when you're working and talking to and trying to communicate with your agencies and departments as to why they propose a plan and how they now can fix it, correct it, so that it'll work on behalf of the community residents, please ask them to take in consideration not just the immediate needs and what the value may be for the construction they want to do, but what is the long-term effect and impact on the health and safety of the residents of this city, this state, and particularly in the immediate area of Melnea Cass. It's a beautiful canopy. It's a beautiful street. It can accommodate the needs of bikers, pedestrians, and cars, but it cannot survive if we start destroying the environmental protections that we have in place, particularly the trees, to, in a sense, help the life and quality of life of the people who live there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elisa. Miss Nina.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fabulous. I'm not great with Zoom. Hi, everybody. I am Nina La Negra, and I've been a 10-year resident of Lower Roxbury and the South End, and over 25 years a resident of Roxbury. I'm an artist, and I'm actively engaged in helping to preserve and strengthen the community at large, and for Black and Brown people specifically in Lower Roxbury and Greater Roxbury. And first, let me just thank you all for the opportunity to speak. Thank Council President Janey, Councilors and Chair Wu, City Councilor Mejia, and the rest of the august members of the council, the three chiefs, the administrators, and the public at large. We welcome your support in this vital matter. And as a participant in the Friends of Melnea Cass Boulevard group to save the trees for over 6 years, even though they've been meeting for almost a decade now, I've learned a few things about my neighborhood. And one thing I've learned is that everyone cares deeply about the trees and the people who benefit from them in Roxbury. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work with Friends of Melnea Cass Boulevard, a diverse, dedicated, and diligent group of people who volunteer their time and experience and have an overwhelming compassion for the residents of our neighborhood. And you'll hear from many of them during the course of this meeting. And most of you here know the history of this neighborhood, but I'd like to briefly summarize and add one comment. The comment first. We are a community under attack, at siege, at war. Between the opioid crisis, gentrification, affordable and low-income housing rental rates increasing, academic institutions overbuying and overbuilding, and finally, the decimation of our urban forests that mitigates climate change, public health issues, and environmental justice issues, we're being attacked in a callous manner by the management of this project. We're experiencing the third and perhaps deadliest wave of gentrification and urban renewal in Boston. The first back in the 30s when the businesses and some people were displaced in the New York streets area. The second in the 80s when Black home ownership dropped from 39% to 12% in 2015. And this third wave, which is marked by the ongoing demolition and destruction of community institutions like the Harriet Tubman House and the proposed destruction of over 120 trees and damage to more than 200 additional. Back in the second wave in the 70s, when over 2,000 homes were destroyed, thousands were displaced, and the trauma experience continues to send shockwaves throughout this city. So in a city of first, all of you and the mayor himself, who was recently appointed the new chair of National Climate Mayors Group, he and you can do the following to support us, and that is 1, cease this project, 2, create a true community process, and 3, build a greenway on Melniacas Boulevard, which would mitigate all of these damaging issues that we're experiencing today, with the highest asthma rate in the city of Boston, if not Massachusetts, being right here in Roxbury. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. La Negra. Now let's go to the 3 chiefs. I think you might have your own order that you've decided. Of course, Chief of Equity, Carolyn Crockett, Chief of Streets, Chris Osgood, and Chief of Environment and Parks, Chris Cook. And I'll just note, feel free to take all the time that you would like, but if we can wrap your statements by 5:25, then each of the counselors will have a 5-minute section Q&A with this panel before you all have to leave at 6. So that would be great.
Councilor Wu, thank you so much. I'm going to lead off. I'm Chris Osgood. I have the honor of serving as Mayor Walsh's Chief of Streets, and as Councilor Wu said, joined by Dr. Crockett, our Chief of Equity, and Chris Cook, our Chief of Environment, Energy, and Open Space, and also joined by a number of other members of the administration, our Transportation Commissioner, Greg Rooney, our City Engineer, Parajay Singh, our Director of Transportation Planning and Policy, Vineet Gupta, and our Senior Planner, Pat Hoey. I imagine there's others as well, but very much in the spirit, Councilor, of your comments. I do want to provide some context, but before I do that, really thank you, Councilor Janey, Councilor Mejia, the councilors, and as has been said, fellow panelists and the public for joining in this conversation. I'm going to bring up this, hopefully, which now everyone can see, and I'm just going to quickly sort of walk through the Melniacas project, really starting with where we are and what's ahead. So where we are right now, as folks I think very well know, the project is paused. And it is paused in many reasons for a lot of things that came up, both in the opening statements of the council, the opening statements of the panelists, and the members of the public. Because of the overwhelming response we have heard from constituents, we want to make sure that we are planning with the community this investment in this corridor. And so we're taking the time as this project is paused to be able to have venues like this, venues like the community meeting that we hosted a couple of months ago, to really be able to engage stakeholders. And as we do that, to also do some of the additional analysis that has been asked of us by the community. So to take a look at the current design and see if there are ways that current design can be modified to save trees, in addition to think about broader concepts, broader changes to what has been proposed that can advance community priorities and save additional trees. And then very much in line with Mr. Elisa's comments, to be able to review the actual environmental impacts and be able to think about approaches that we can take to make sure that we are taking care of this forest that we have here in the heart of our city. That is where we are. What we have ahead is really 2 pieces. One, very much in line with one of the closing comments of Ms. Lanegra to think about how we have a robust community process that makes sure that we are thinking about the steps forward on this project with the community. And second, in line with something which is requested by CLF, among others, and as Stacy covered in her opening comments, if we do go forward with any design that would require the removal of a tree, to go forward with the tree hearing as part of this project. So that's where we are, and that's what's ahead. I'm going to quickly just do some quick context setting on the project overall before turning it over to Dr. Crockett and then to Chief Cook. This project, as folks probably are very well aware, in many ways had its part of its roots in the Roxbury Strategic Master Plan in 2004, which called for the redesign of Melnia Cass Boulevard. The actual community process started 9 years ago now. These are some slides from the initial presentation. In the lower right, you see some of the initial objectives that were called for, that were thought of as priorities as part of this project. Make it more of a neighborhood street, improve pedestrian safety and access. Some of those things have remained sort of at the heart of this project throughout its 9 years of design. One, which obviously was the focus of our council hearing yesterday, was around safety. We looked at some of these maps yesterday in our council hearing. As folks know, the Boston Transportation Department has mapped where there are high frequency or high clusters of crashes on certain streets across the city. These three maps show from left to right the streets that have the most, the top 3% of streets that have the most number of crashes involving vehicles. In the middle, the top 3% of streets that involve crashes that include cyclists. And on the right, the top 3% of streets that have crashes that involve pedestrians. There are very few streets that are in the top 3% on all three of those modes, and Melnia Cass, unfortunately, is one of those. So safety, it was a priority, obviously, in 2011. It was a priority that we know that every single one of us shares today, has been a priority as part of this project, but is part of one of several priorities that are we know that the community is interested in advancing as part of this effort. So in addition to increasing safety, certainly that notion of being a tree-lined street, a greenway, as Ms. Lanegra just mentioned, and really sort of thinking about how it's has that feeling of a neighborhood street. In addition, Melnia Cass Boulevard is a street which, in addition to urban heat island concerns, also is a place that has experienced flooding, a situation that we want to be able to address as part of the redesign. And then just making sure that we're making investments in the redesign of the street that supports people no matter how they're traveling throughout the corridor. But particularly to be able to improve opportunities to walk, to bike, to take transit, etc. With these four objectives in mind, the current plan has a set of designs, and these are sort of elements of the current design, which is before us. In terms of increasing safety, the notion is to table the intersections at Albany Street near Orchard Gardens, to be able to table the intersection at Washington Street, to be able to have raised crosswalks as you're turning off of Melnia Cass Boulevard to signal that you're entering into a residential neighborhood, and to improve sight lines throughout the corridor through protected intersections. In addition to that, there is a focus of expanding sidewalks, improving lighting, having a net increase in the number of street trees. I'm sure we can sort of talk more about that. Increase public art opportunities throughout the corridor. To make sure that we're improving resiliency, to actually reduce the amount of overall sort of hardscape and asphalt that is throughout the Melnia Cass corridor, and put in stormwater management best practices to be able to deal with some of the flooding that exists. And then in addition, make sure that we're being able to encourage that sort of mode shift that we know that residents have an interest in. So the current design calls for improved bike accommodations on both sides, with cycle tracks on both sides, making adjustments to bus stops, et cetera. One thing I wanted to note is that one of the things that was called for or was identified in the 2004 plan, I believe in the 2011 presentation as well, was actually making this a bus rapid transit corridor. We actually heard early on in the process that was not of interest to the community for the very specific reason of the impact it would have on trees. And so that is not part of the current design, and certainly reflects the interest of the residents. To a point that many have made, Councilor O'Malley, I think, made it in his opening comments, and I know others did as well. Our interest in the work going forward is not to pit these things against each other, to pit sort of safety against resiliency, resiliency against trees, trees against motion, et cetera, but really to find a design path forward working with the community that can help us towards the Melnia Cass Boulevard that strengthens not just the Roxbury community, but as Ms. Lisa said, the community as a whole. So again, where we are, The project is currently paused while we go through this process of engaging stakeholders, of looking at the current design, of exploring new concepts, of doing that deeper analysis on environmental impacts. And when we go forward, and we expect to be able to start or restart the community process this winter, we will do that obviously with the community, and in any process going forward where we will be removing, if we remove a tree, we would certainly have a tree hearing as part of that. So that is the quick update on where we are. It's now my pleasure to pass it over to the next member of our panel, our Chief of Equity, Dr. Crockett.
Thanks, Chief Osgood, appreciate that. And thank you very much. Good evening to Chairwoman Wu for convening us, President Janey, and Councilor Mejia for convening all of us for this really important conversation. Really appreciate residents and advocates, folks really taking their time to make sure that we have a space to talk and to be in conversation. And thank you for the conveners and makers here. So my name is Carolyn Crockett. I was appointed as the Chief of Equity for the City of Boston this summer. Essentially, my charge is to embed equity in all city plans, processes, and practices moving forward, and to guide the city's work with an intersectional lens that centers economic inclusion, racial equity, wellness, and gender equity, with a targeted focus on communities of color and immigrants. And so an important piece of work, and so this process and this project are particularly important because there's so much at stake and there's so much in the conversation that's important. I know well the history of the corridor, and I know of this corridor in particular, and I know how important it is for residents to continue to inform city plans in general and this plan in particular. So as Chief Osgood mentioned, he paused the process for Malia Cass's redesign at the end of the summer to allow for a closer review of the design plans as they have been presented to the public. The real purpose of this pausing, as well as the ensuing community meeting that we convened in September, was to really seek a way forward that prioritizes safety, which is the focal point of this project, pedestrian safety, rider safety for cyclists and vehicles, and also minimizes tree removal. And so it was quickly apparent that there had been a need to come back to the conversation, because it seems like both the intent, the focus, and the process of planning and engagement of the public had sort of lost purpose with each other. And so we, meaning the offices of equity, transportation, and environment, energy, and open space, convened an evening Zoom meeting on September 15th. It's wonderful to see that many people who are actually here in this hearing were a part of that discussion. And the meeting was really about discussing the status of the project, to hear public questions, comments, and concerns. Chief Osgood has called for the meeting and paused the process in response to, again, concerns, questions, and it seemed like somehow how the message about what this project is about had been lost, and the city takes responsibility for that. The meeting included about 100 people who were there, representing many area residents and advocates who have been active in the public process to date, including members of the Friends of Malia Cass, United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury, folks from Madison Park CDC, as well as the Cyclist Union. And so what's interesting and what's important about that conversation is that it really let us know that there was more work to do in terms of discussing this project, and also making sure that there was a clear understanding of what residents were advocating for, and to understand how that could further inform the design process moving forward. And so we have agreed to pause the process to have more of an internal review of design options with the vendor, with also an ongoing conversation with Mass DOT and the discussion with other city departments to see what we might be able to bring back out to the public in a meeting that will happen later this winter. We had originally hoped that that meeting could have taken place in October, and apologize that the timeline has extended, but it's a set of conversations that I have been a part of and watching so that we could bring a fuller representation of design scenarios to the public in a few weeks. And so again, we have agreed to focus on minimizing the number of trees that needed to be removed while maintaining the project's overall goal of improving and increasing safety. And so again, understanding that somewhere along the way in terms of this project, in terms of our engagement process and the public understanding of the focus of the project, there's been somehow the train has gotten off the track. And so before us, the consideration is, what is it that we can do to potentially salvage this project, especially if it means that we need to really think about not only reducing and basically avoiding tree removal. I will say this, and then I'll close to yield my time to Chief Cook, is that one of the things that we have found that has been striking to me is we do not have disagreement about the value and importance of tree canopy and tree cover. We do not have disagreement about the necessity of making sure neighborhoods, particularly environmentally vulnerable neighborhoods like Roxbury, have this level of environmental focus and protection. But we are also, I know I am concerned also right now about the health of these trees as they are. So want to make sure that there's a way to separate out two different concerns. And if that's part of what we need to do during the pause, it's important. The health of some of the trees that remain, some of them that are near death, some of them that are a bit sickly, is concerning. And so we don't need to use that as a way to justify removing trees, but we need to have some kind of answer and some kind of consideration for that. So I'll pause here and definitely look forward to conversation and questions. As Chief of Equity, just look forward to just continue to be involved in this process and making sure we can get a reset that works, particularly for folks who are concerned. So Chief Cook, I yield to you. Thank you for, again, the invitation.
Counselor, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. To butcher Shakespeare, I understand that brevity is the soul of wit, so I will be as quick as possible. I just want to recognize that I'm not going to be more eloquent on the value of trees than those who have already testified. And I want to thank Sarah and Caroline, Jennifer and Luis and Nina making all those points. And as Carolyn Crockett said, I don't think there's any disagreement at all with the value of trees moving forward. I do think it's important to look at some of the environmental contexts that my cabinet will be working with Chief Osgood in the evaluation of this project moving forward. And that is, what is the relation between trees and heat? And what are the environmental benefits and or trade-offs of advocating for different transit projects, and where are the opportunities that we can actually scaffold success? So a little bit of context: last year we conducted a LIDAR study of the city of Boston's tree canopy. That set a technical analysis for us to go out with an urban forestry RFP to develop an action plan to increase our urban tree canopy. That's focused on a lot of different environmental benefits. Many of them have already been mentioned, but the most impactful environmental benefit of urban tree canopy is clearly its effect on the urban heat island effect. And it's definite, acutely an effect in our environmental justice neighborhoods like Roxbury. So when we're looking at any loss of canopy or the potential to actually gain canopy in some of these neighborhoods, we really have to look at it through that lens. So a big part of our urban forest action plan, and one of the major tenets of our actual RFP, was embedding environmental justice and embedding equity into the decision making. I believe it was Luis who said, you know, the community can't be planned for, the community has to be planned with. And that's really a tenet of our urban forestry agenda moving forward. Based on heat, though, as early as 2015 and before that, heat is a vulnerability. Sea level rise and stormwater management gets a lot of attention, but heat kills in America today. And so we really have to take drastic action to reduce heat and the effects of it as we prepare for our climate reality and as we deal with the climate crisis that we find ourselves in. It won't be too long before the city of Boston has 90-day heat waves. And when today we only experience, 3-day heat waves, and we designate it. So to prepare for that, the number one thing that we can do is actually expand the tree canopy in the city of Boston. And that's why we look to partner with the Boston Transportation Department. One last thing I would just want to call attention to is that we are starting a heat vulnerability assessment right now through the Environment Department. We're proud to receive a municipally vulnerability preparedness MVP action grant from the Commonwealth, and we'll be partnering in partnership with the Resilient District Collaborative, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the Metro Mayor's Climate Preparedness Task Force, the City of Chelsea, as well as other surrounding communities, to make sure that we're all taking action as a region while we're also taking action locally. So I'm here to answer any questions that the council may have, and very appreciative of this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Chief Osgood, Dr. Crockett, and Chief Cook. Really appreciate it. We are going to have just enough time for everyone, I think, except for me, to have 5 minutes. So I'll sneak in some at the end before you all, I know, have a hard stop and a lot to do. So we'll start with Council President Kim Janey, and I'm going to time my colleagues as well so that everyone gets their time in before our administration folks have to leave.
Thank you. Please time me. Many thanks again to everyone that we just heard from. I think it's really important that we don't repeat. So you heard a lot of the history here as people, the public, as well as panelists spoke. And so we don't want to repeat, the history here. We don't want to compound decades of redlining and systemic racism that we've heard about, particularly in this neighborhood. And I know you've said that the project has been paused, that there will be some more internal conversation. And a question really is just about that planning and how do we open up those internal conversations to include more voices from the community? Because what we don't want is then, those internal conversations to happen, all of those trade-offs, all those discussions, the opportunities, the challenges, all of that stuff happens. You come up with a new plan, then you bring it out, and then here we are again. So, one question is, how do we open up the planning process internally as this is paused and many of the chiefs on this call are rethinking what the design could be? I think it's also important to highlight what Chief Osgood already said, which is that we're not really interested in hearing about false choices, about either it's the trees or it's about multi-mode transportation and safety. So I think it's and both for the people on this call. That's the challenge for us to figure out, is how we do both. So how do we open up the planning process and get more voices in there?
So I can start, and certainly other members of the panel, both committee members and my fellow administration colleagues can obviously weigh in as well. One of the things which we took away from the September committee conversation was sort of a clear charge to sort of do some additional work just to understand, not design specifics, not get to the point where we have sort of fully sort of wrestled with a whole bunch of design elements, but instead just in general, what direction should we go, and do a little bit more of that environmental baseline and understanding of potential impacts and opportunities along this corridor. That's what we're doing right now. And then our interest sort of come this winter, as Dr. Crockett mentioned, is really to sort of re-engage the community or engage the community in that sort of open and transparent process. I think we're still very much designing what that will look like, and open obviously to feedback as part of this session on recommendations. We've received some already from the Friends of Melnia Cass Boulevard on processes that we could follow, which we're certainly looking at as part of it.
And I think that's important. So I'm glad that those conversations are happening. There was a deep concern that trees were being removed without a hearing, that the park, so I don't know what the chief cook, what the process is. My understanding is that if we're removing trees, that there's got to be a hearing. And there was a lot of concern that we weren't following that as a city. And that's in large part why I called a city council hearing, because, community wanted a voice to get out their concerns in a much more, I think, public way. I mean, there have been lots of meetings that advocates have been having, and I know you guys have been having, internally, but, my question really is how we bring folks together. Why isn't that we did not have a hearing, and will we have a commitment for future hearings? And I'm hopeful that the new plan isn't going to have tree removals, but I think the point here is the importance of engaging the public along the way. And I think people really felt shut out from that process.
Sure, Counselor, if it's all right, Chief Osgood, I can touch on that very briefly. Historically, street widening projects, large scale transportation infrastructure projects by the state, they're actually exempt from that law. So if there's a street widening, you actually don't need the tree hearing removal. There was a crossover between the DOT and BTD design process of this, where it was determined that this was a street widening project and we wouldn't need to have that tree hearing. At the last public meeting, Counselor, largely in respect to all the issues that you've brought up, Chief Osgood made a commitment that any tree that's in the public realm as part of this project will receive that tree hearing as part of the project. And so Chief Osgood has already made that commitment. It wasn't a determination by the Parks Commissioner, Ryan Woods, at all. And in fact, if you want to find a very good tree supporter, there's one in Ryan Woods. So moving forward, we're totally committed to that process. And I think that alleviates the confusion around people not having a voice about any potential removals.
I know my time is running out. I have questions around language access, how we're getting information out to people. Obviously just in English, but also in other languages. We need to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate. And then there's a larger question around the overall design and how it fits in with the other development projects that are happening close by, particularly in Nubian Square. So I think it's really important to, I don't know if BPDA is on this call, other departments may need to be part of this thinking. And if someone can quickly respond, because I'm sure I'm out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. The quick response will go on to the next counselor.
Thank you.
Absolutely on language access, very happy to loop back on that. And the VPDA has been very involved in some of the pieces of this, and happy to make sure that they're part of subsequent conversations as well.
Great, thank you. Counselor Mejia.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'll just pick back up on the language access piece, because you know that is usually my my spiel. So don't worry, Council President, I will keep on with that thread. I'm curious in regards to the language access, in addition to just being able to have things translated and interpreted in multiple languages, I'm always curious about those folks who don't know how to read or write even in their own native language. So in terms of communication overall, I think that it's something for us to really think about in terms of the level of engagement that was put forth in this effort. And I'm just curious what that looked like.
It is a great question. And I think there's a big opportunity for us in the next round of engagement in front of us to go even further. But over the last now 9 years, there have been a series of public workshops. I think there were 8 community meetings, a number of site visits as part of the conversation, and then a lot of sort of direct conversations with the Friends of Melania Cass Boulevard and other stakeholders along the entire corridor. I think as we sort of had talked about yesterday, I think there are some things which we've been able to do over the course of the last several months, not just within the Public Works and Transportation Department of the city, but across the entire administration, running community meetings in multiple languages, having materials translated into multiple languages, and to your broader point, thinking about how we just make the community process more accessible, that as we pick back up the community process are lessons that we can bring into our next round of engagement. If there are specific sort of techniques you have in mind, I'm very happy to.
Yep. And I'm going to just say this because I only have 5 minutes and I'm not going to give you any of those tips and techniques during my little time. So I'll follow up with you at a separate situation. But I want to get to some of my additional questions here. Don't be eating up on my time here, Chief. I'm just curious. You said that there were a number of different meetings that were had with Friends of the Melania Cass Boulevard, but I'm just curious about how many meetings. Can you give me a number and how many people attended those meetings? And if you heard a strong opposition, why did we move forward with the project of removing 124 trees?
I think that's I appreciate both the specific question and the broader question. The specific question, and there are others on the city team who might more specifically be able to talk about the level of engagement. In fact, there's members of the public who were probably part of almost every single one of these. But I believe there were 2 public workshops. There were 4 public site walks, 8 community meetings, 14 meetings, I believe, with the Friends of Melania Cass Boulevard, and then a number of sort of like direct outreach and sort of pop-up meetings along the corridor, whether sort of along the entire stretch of Melnia Cass Boulevard. We've heard a lot of feedback over the course of those 9 years, and the design has changed fairly significantly as a result of the public feedback. I would say that we got to a point, and this is more of a point of clarification. We got to a point where the actual number of mature trees, healthy mature trees, was actually far fewer than it had been sort of initially in the plan. So just for folks' awareness, what is currently sort of the paused design, so to speak, has 105 trees in total, of which 26 are dead, another 17 are in poor condition, and then that leaves, I think, 62 trees that are going to be are good, in good condition or in fair condition. Most of them are in good condition that would be removed. Obviously, we've heard throughout this entire process the concern about the trees, but there have been a number of strengths to the current design, which is why the design progressed to this point in time. Clearly, though, we are here because we've heard the very strong feedback that even those 62 is too many. We want to see if there's ways, to the council president's point, of making sure that we can reduce the trees while still advancing the other priorities as part of this project.
I definitely want to get one more question in, okay? So
30 seconds left.
Oh, dang. Chief, you better stop talking so much. I need to know really quick, if you could tell me, how does this plan fit into the city's commitment, the mayor's commitment to be bold in terms of climate action, to reducing climate change and increasing the urban canopy? This came from a question from the public. So I want to make sure that I put it in here.
And Counselor, I want to be respectful of the time. So if I need to follow up with you directly because of the time constraints, but that is the lens, that's the responsibility of our cabinet to assist Chief Osgood in the development of this next iteration of this plan. It has to happen within context. And by the way, we're acutely aware that this street is named after Melnia Cass, a person who made her entire public realm better and looked at the big picture on projects. And so that's what we have to do with this project, and that's what you have a commitment from us to do.
Okay. I'm gonna come back to y'all.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Wu. And just wanted to follow up on some of the comments of Councilor Janey, but I worked with Councilor Janey on health disparities in the communities of color. But my question is to Chief Cook. Chief, with the high traffic on Melnia Cass, air pollution, we were talking about the high asthma rate, often a truck route along Melnia Cass, a lot of trucks. Besides asthma, can you talk a little about the environmental concerns in and around that, on that street, but in and around the neighborhood as well?
I can, Counselor, and just very briefly, I just don't think it's appropriate to comment on it without also commenting on COVID-19, right? So when you look at the disproportionate effect of COVID-19 on communities of color and socially vulnerable populations, that is a respiratory disease that is exacerbated by the heat island effect. That is why you have to look at these projects critically and look at what is the co-benefits you're getting from the urban tree canopy, not just in that public realm that's immediately adjacent, but the entire neighborhood itself, right? Because again, as we were talking about, these projects happen within a context. And so when you start talking about fine particulate matter that can cause a whole host of respiratory diseases beyond asthma, and the fact that that is exacerbated by extreme heat, and the fact that marginalized communities of historic redlining who have been victimized by poor planning in the past, that's why there's an opportunity to really try to get all those health co-benefits you can out of trees, whether it's particulate matter or the fact that they literally just cool our environment and provide us the oxygen to breathe. The last thing I want to mention, though, is that there is an analysis to be done. You know, in general, established, more mature trees are better for the environment, but trees in the public realm grow really big, grow really fast, and they have a very short lifespan. So there is a maintaining of the urban forest. There is a time where you have to look at planting additional trees or removing dead and dying trees in order to have a healthy tree canopy. That's the technical analysis that Chief Osgood and Carolyn Crockett are really looking at it. The nexus of environmental justice concerns with the actual environmental benefits instead as well, excuse me.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. And probably besides the neighborhoods in and around the highways in Boston, including the Mass Pike, I bet you Melnia Cass is probably one of the most traveled streets in the city. But that amount of traffic and cars cutting through and trucks cutting through and that air pollution letting off. Have there been any studies at all just on air pollution in and around that neighborhood?
There have, sir. The Union of Concerned Scientists have studied the impact, and I know you yourself, as well as Councillor Wu, last year were at an event where they studied the impact of the immediate adjacency of the traffic on the Chinatown neighborhood. It's those same impacts that we saw in Chinatown, which would largely be the result here. Now, I will say, in general, you know, Roxbury does not have the lowest tree canopy in the entire city. You know, that's not necessarily a metric that we want to be proud of. We want to expand the tree canopy. We want to expand the opportunities, especially where so much of our socially vulnerable populations are on that corridor.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Councilor Wu. No further questions.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Really appreciate your giving back extra seconds. I also saw that Ms. La Negra had a blue Zoom hand raised. Did you have a comment on something one of the other councillors or panelists was saying?
Yes, I just wanted to respond to Councillor Mejia and add to Chief Osgood's understanding. State Representative China Tyler was very concerned about the representation on Friends of Melnia Cass Boulevard because the early incarnations included city employees and city project folks and programs that were represented, and their vote helped to influence the forward movement of this project, while the residents were in complete opposition to the forward movement. So this is very problematic going forward if you have representatives from the city and the community setting voting for things that are against the community.
Thank you very much. Would any of the chiefs like to respond to that as Councilor Braden gets ready for her 5 minutes?
I very much appreciate that point, and I think similar to as we were talking about before, we have every interest in figuring out how we have a sort of a transparent decision-making process as we head into to this winter.
Thank you. Councilor Braden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to cede my time to some of the local folks who are the most impacted by this project, and I will continue to listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Councilor O'Malley?
Well, following that, I guess I have to be particularly brief as well, and I promise too, because it is important to have members of the community. But just very, very briefly, Chief Cook and Chief Osgood as well as Chief Crockett, all chiefs. Several years ago, we were able to secure, with your partnership, funding in the budget for a city LiDAR study that would study the tree canopy of the city of Boston. Can you sort of speak about what the result was of that and status of that, and then I'll briefly get into a specific Melnia Cass question and then finish up.
Yeah, I'd love to, Councilor. So in general, for statistically speaking, the city did not lose any tree canopy. All right, and so that's very interesting when you consider the historic pace of development that's happened in the city. Where the city did lose tree canopy, though, is largely on residential property. And so that's interesting. That means that our public realm efforts have actually paid dividends, and that's been in, through the mayor's leadership and in partnership with the city council. But it's also been not necessarily just through the Parks Department. We've added, 117 trees at Smith Playground, 230 trees at Martin's Park in South Boston. But where the needle has actually been moved is through large scale coordination with folks like the Boston Transportation Department and the Public Works Department, as they do large scale public realm projects and really prioritize the urban tree canopy through that. But that loss of canopy on public realm means that as we develop our urban forestry action plan, we are going to have to deal with the fact that we're going to have to protect our most significant trees, even if they're on private property, because they just pay us so many environmental dividends. Other cities do that, and I think it's time for Boston to start considering it as well.
And do we have a special designation on legacy trees, trees that have been here for hundreds of years?
We don't. So it's interesting. In partnership with the Emerald Necklace Conservancy, we actually name those trees, we measure them, and in partnership with the Conservancy, they take care of those trees throughout the necklace. Really, all neighborhoods should benefit from those large historic trees. And there are those trees that exist in neighborhoods like East Boston and neighborhoods like Roxbury. And so the more protections we could put around them, the more environmental benefits we receive, because it's the biggest trees that do the most for our environment.
And would any trees currently on Melnia be sort of meet that criteria for designation of a legacy tree, to your knowledge?
I'll have to follow up with you. There's been an extensive tree inventory survey on that, but how we designate and how we define it, and Chief Osgood, unless you know off the top of your head, I'd have to follow up. There's some big trees out there, that's for sure.
Certainly. And then, so the last question is the percentage has stayed roughly the same after this most recent LiDAR study. What percentage of Boston is covered? Or what percentage is our tree canopy?
It's 27%, Counselor. For our climate ready, we really want to get to a citywide 35%, but we got to be very respectful of the fact that 35% or 27%, which is what we're at today. Well, what does that mean if you're living in a community that's 11% or 18%, right? And so that's where we really have to make targeted investments to really address those historic inequities in our city.
And to that point, of that 27%, and just so folks know, that's actually better than many comparable sized cities, because we've been working on this for quite some time, so I don't want to lose sight of the fact. But I would venture a guess that if that was broken down by neighborhood, you would see some significant discrepancies or inequities as it relates to the percentage. I'd argue that my district probably has one of the higher tree canopy percentage, and other districts would be much lower. So do we have that breakdown by neighborhood or by council district or by ward?
We certainly have it by neighborhood, Counselor. I don't necessarily have it by ward, but you're absolutely right. West Roxbury is the leafiest part of the city. What's interesting though is the largest canopy loss wasn't in those areas with the lowest canopy. That's actually where we saw some gains. We saw some gains in East Boston. We saw some marginal gains in South Boston. We actually saw the biggest losses in neighborhoods like Hyde Park and West Roxbury, where it's the residential development. Just to put a finer point on your questioning though, there is a direct causal relationship between lack of tree canopy and heat island effect. And that's why we have to be really lightning focused on places with lower tree canopy.
Certainly, and I certainly think that's why there is such passion with these particular trees in question along Melnia Cast. So thank you all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, perfect timing. We turn off the alarm so it doesn't go off. Okay. Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you again to colleagues for asking some pretty thoughtful questions. I am curious about, and I think it was laid out early on in the presentation, but I think important to hear again, what is sort of generally the process going forward? So what happens after today? What can the neighbors expect? What can the advocates expect? What can we as a council expect that public process to be?
Councilor, great question. I'll start, and certainly if Chief Crockett or Chief Cook wants to add, by all means. So the work that we've been doing since essentially our September community meeting is really looking at sort of broad design alternatives, and then that sort of deeper environmental look, the potential environmental impact of various design choices along this corridor. We were hoping that work would be wrapped up sooner than, and that it would be wrapped up by now. So we'd be able to already be able to go back out to the public. It looks like we'll be wrapped up with that in time for us over the course of this winter, to be able to report out on the environmental impact of the current design, alterations to the current design, and more significant sort of conceptual changes to what the Melnea-Cass Boulevard corridor could look like, and use that really as a starting point for an inclusive public conversation about design directions going forward. That then would inform sort of the actual changes, potential changes to the contract and the final design that would and take us towards construction. And has been said, if as the result of that community conversation, there's a design that is selected that results in the removal of any tree, we would certainly go through a tree hearing as part of that.
Great. Anyone have anything to add to that? That's, I mean, with the timeline and all that sort of stuff, has that been shared with the community at large other than today? They sort of ready for those next steps in that process?
The broad trajectory, but we have not gotten, until we sort of have done the background research we were asked to do, we haven't sort of laid out the specific, here's the next meeting and the actual schedule. Our hope is that we'll be able to do that shortly in the sort of weeks and months ahead.
Great. We certainly see here community members who are interested in this process, and for sure to Councilor Janey and Councilor Mejia's points around language access and making sure that that information is widely translated. So when it's shared with the community and with the neighbors, that they're fully engaged in that and understanding what the process is going forward. And because of Councilor Braden's, I think, intuition and thinking about the time ahead this evening, I'll end my questions there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilor Sabi George. Also wonderful under time. Turn that off. Just one quick question for me, and then I'll swoop back for a last minute second round from any other colleagues. Much of the one point that was brought up over and over again initially in saying why the project could not be stopped was that there was federal funds tied to it that would just disappear if we delayed too much. Can you just talk a little bit about that? What has happened either with that consideration or that batch of funding?
Great question. So the design of this project is funded by the city. The actual construction of this project is a blend of state and federal funding, which is why the project itself, even though it has been sort of a city design effort, was bid by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, by MassDOT, and the construction would be overseen by MassDOT. As part of that, sort of the due diligence that we're doing, it's exactly to answer that question. What sort of alterations have what kind of type of impact, either on the funding or on the timeline, and that's part of what we want to be able to report back out.
Okay, great. Asking colleagues if you have other questions for our chiefs who had a hard stop at 6. Could you please raise your blue Zoom hand, and would love to squeeze those in if anyone else.
I can't get to my blue hand.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can't find my blue hand either.
Okay, all right. Madam Pres first, and then Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. Just quickly, the reason I called this hearing primarily was to give voice, and so I do want to yield to anyone, the second panel, and then anyone who wants to testify. But I did want that breakdown, the canopy breakdown by neighborhood that you said you have, Chief Cook. If you could just get that to us through the chair of the committee, that would be great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia?
Yes, so I'm curious if it's possible moving forward for us to really consider whether it's a chief or maybe a chief assistant to stay on these hearings. And I know Chief Osgood, I was so incredibly impressed that you stayed all night, the other hearing that we had. But just because we're gonna have people who are gonna be asking questions, if there's any way for us to just be able to follow up with an email, or there's a level of engagement, I don't think that it should end with a hearing. I just feel like people still need those questions answered. So if there's a way for them to continue to ask those questions, that would be great. And then my last question is, what analysis, this is a question from the community too, I'm trying to help them out here. What analysis have you done on the existing two-way bike paths to show that there is anything about that design that increases safety? Who can answer that question?
I will start and be brief, and I think there may be other members of the city team who can certainly can join in as well. So as folks may know, on the north side of Mount Cass Boulevard, there is a two-way bike facility today. As part of the current and now paused design, the idea would be a bike path on each side. The notion of the bike path on each side sort of reflects a design direction towards what would be sort of a neighborhood street. The idea of if you're trying to access a school, a business, a home on sort of the Nubian Square side of Mount Cass Boulevard, that sort of there would be a bike accommodation on that side as well. Certainly one of the things that we've been asked to look at is what's the implication of just keeping the two-way bike facility on the north side in line with essentially that connection between the Southwest Corridor and the South Bay Harbor Trail. And so we certainly heard that feedback, and I actually expect that we'll probably be hearing that feedback as well from other folks who are testifying ahead.
I'm
You good, Councilor Mejia?
not gonna hold anyone hostage.
Okay.
Keep it moving. Thank
Any
you.
other counselors? And I want to recognize that Councilor Flaherty is here as well. So Councilor Flaherty, if you wanted to make any comment or a quick question of the administration chiefs before they have to run.
That'd be great. Just a quick statement. Obviously, thank you, Madam Chair, and also for hosting the hearing, and also for lead sponsors, Councilor Mejia and Council President Cheney. My office has received a lot of emails and calls about this plan, expressing concerns about the removal of mature trees along the corridor and underscoring the importance of maintaining a mature tree canopy in this area. So it's my understanding that the city has reassessed the current plan, and so my hope is that we're able to bring some clarity to that. Sorry for obviously joining late, but I know that a lot of the abutters, the property owners there, have not really been sort of part and parcel to a lot of the discussions, and they've got some significant concerns, particularly with respect to any improvements that are going to be made over there, in addition to trees, obviously the proposal to cut down trees, but also the streetscape and the roadways as well, and how it will impact transportation, traffic, and also their respective businesses. So a lot of concerns, and my hope is that this plan has been shelved, and that's my 2 cents. I appreciate it, Madam Chair, and thanks again to the sponsors and obviously to the administration officials here, and look forward to continued partnership as we try to make some sense of this and move forward.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Okay, thank you so much to our chiefs. I know we always give you a hard time when you have to leave, but considering that you stayed on so long yesterday, and you three, especially within the administration, have always been responsive and visible and out in the community. So I really appreciate your time. Did you want to note, I think there are some members of the administration that are staying on. I don't know, does everyone have to go, or Para, maybe Commissioner Rooney? Are there others who are staying on afterwards? Go for it, Chief Osgood.
No, I'm staying on.
Oh, you're staying.
Wow.
2 nights in a row. Oh.
That's
Okay, we appreciate you very much. We are going to move on from this panel, pending any last call for comments from colleagues. So thank you very much, Mr. Elisa, Ms. La Negra, and our 3 administration representatives. As we kind of switch the Zoom room around to move to our second.
Madam Chair, just Council Flaherty, one just quick question of the panelists is, have there been any land takings there, or particularly as it pertains to the abutters, have any land been ceded in anticipation of this proposal? And if the proposal gets shelved, will those discussions revert back to land being reverted back to some of the stakeholders along Melnia?
That'll be the last question for this panel while I make sure everyone from the next panel is on as well.
That's a great question. In short, there are some small sections of adjacent land. I can get back to you though about the specific details, and then to your point about what the implications are if there's a redesign. I'm happy to loop back to you on that.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's more than appropriate. Just because if we're taking property under the guise that it's a government taking and we're using it for a legitimate purpose, but if the purposes get ixnayed, that land needs to revert back to the rightful property owners. That's my 2 cents.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I think I led everyone in the right way. I want to take 3 more members to give public testimony between this next panel as well, which will be Bill Singleton, who has very patiently been waiting, I believe it's Miss Mela Miles and Allison Poltinas. If you could, and I'll time you for 2 minutes each, and then on to panel 2. Mr. Singleton?
Yes.
There we go.
First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for participating in this. This is very important. I wanted to give a brief sort of background on my involvement with this effort, which started in 2011. I do business here. I live here. We're in the eye of the hurricane, so to speak. And this is not the first time. I'm a publisher. I'm a ward committeeman, and I'm president of United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury, as well as a citizen here. And UNLR particularly has been in this struggle when they took the buildings here long ago. And now some are trying to take the trees. And the real question should be, why save the trees? Well, because they present health and enjoyment of the citizens who live here. And so this is why I'm so glad that Friends of Mania Cass, and other groups, other community groups have joined together to make sure that we secure the safety and the enjoyment. And because basically we want to walk and ride our bikes and in some cases drive along a richer environment. The last question about taking was very important because you see, if they are simply saying that they're going to give us more public safety, does that mean that we're going to be developing there at 90 Windsor Street? Are they going to be taking some of our property there? Or are they going to be taking the trees that we would enjoy there? And I am very concerned about getting more voices into the room. A lot of times the people that we're talking about cannot get on these Zoom calls, and they don't really have the kind of same access. And many times we're being talked about, but we don't get to speak. We're being discussed, but we don't get to decide. And we're being told, oh, this is for our enjoyment, for our betterment, but then we're not a part of creating the solution. So the problem there, I think, is we need more outreach to many people that I know are in this community. I walk these blocks from Mania Class all the way down there to the hospital. And I see and talk to people every day, and they don't know what is going on. They're afraid that the trees will be taken. And people like Yvonne Larray and Nina and others, and David and Mary and many others, they're the ones that are taking up the torch to protect this area. But my question
Thank you, Mr. Singleton.
to the council, will I'm sorry, what? Yes, okay, I'm gonna be brief here. And that is, you spoke of next steps. Will the next step be to provide us with the kind of access to being a part of creating the solution or not? What steps are taken to include people from this area that want to be a part of building the solution? We do not want someone to come in and widen the streets and take the trees. We do not want this or take the land. We are against it. I remember in 2011 when Nataka Creighton was president, and we protested against it then. So this has been a long struggle. And each time we're told, well, we're going to include, well, we're going to change. I don't see that yet. And I'm wondering what are the actual steps that are going to be taken to make sure that voices like United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury, like the people that I'm representing at Ward 9, like the people that I see every day, what steps are taken to include them in this process for real?
Thank you, Mr. Singleton. Appreciate it. Ms. Miles? Mela?
Yes, good evening. I'm Mela from ACE. I direct transit-oriented development there and the Chief Engineer, and I'm a lifelong Roxbury resident. Couple of things that rise to the surface here for me are the report that was done on the life expectancy of people in 02119 in Roxbury versus Back Bay. And there's a difference of 30 years. And in Back Bay, you have Commonwealth Ave, and I can't ever imagine anybody wanting to come and cut down the trees along the Commonwealth Mall. But why would we not be listened to here in Roxbury? The other thing that I have a question on is the community always has to react versus the proactive of going first to our community and saying we want to do this, having come before, but the engagement process did not result in the desired results. And the question is, who's listening? If you're naming trees in the Emerald Necklace, why don't our trees have names? I saw, I'm gonna say this and then I'll end. I watched a documentary about land encroachment in Palestine. And one of the evil things that they did was go out there and get backhoes and rip the olive trees out of the ground. And all of those trees that were owned by the people and gave them sustenance in life had names. So we need to look at how our trees are for us. And the naming of the trees should be something that happens all over the city of Boston. And there's no reason to do what, in my mind, as a lifelong Roxbury resident, we're asking, that there be a redevelopment and a reconsideration and to revisit the plan and then come about with something that adds trees in, creates more of an urban forest. Some of those trees were apple trees. I know those trees, the apples didn't look very edible, but just asking that be more of the plan is to add more trees, not subtract. We can't breathe without them. They are our lungs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Poltinas?
I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have to say I'm somewhat discouraged by the answers I'm hearing from the three chiefs, and that they have been internally working on redesigns since September, and yet no one in the community has been talked to or reached out to or involved. I live in Mission Hill, but as Mr. Elias said, this is a citywide road that all of us use, driving, biking, walking. And so what happens on this road affects everybody. It's a boulevard. It's meant to be a boulevard that has an edge to it that protects the residential neighborhoods from the noise and the traffic that is so prevalent on those travel lanes. I was the one who filed a year and a half ago the Freedom of Information Act request to Ryan Woods at the Parks Department as to why a street tree hearing was not being held. And I didn't hear an answer for 9 months. So I have a concern here that we're failing to address some of the major issues with the project. One being, why is it being widened? And why are the trees coming down? They haven't answered that question today. The two-way bike trail that is on the north side is part of a network. It was designed as part of the South Bay Harbor Trail to connect Ruggles Station to South Boston to the water's edge. And that plan has been put aside for one-way bike lanes that would be very close to the curb, putting bike riders at much greater risk for air quality issues. And a bike path on the tropical food side, riders would have to cross 7 intersections and driveways, whereas the existing bike path goes from Ruggles Station all the way to Shawmut without crossing any intersections at all. So those dangers have not been decreased. The dangers are actually increased for bikers with the new design. And I'm not hearing a clear rejection of the current design in their answers. So I have to say I'm confused. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Allison. Okay, I know we still have a number of people signed up for public testimony who are very patient. So we'll go next to the second panel and then resume public testimony after that. And then we'll play the video testimony to close. So I want to welcome Dwayne Tyndall, the Executive Director of Alternatives for Community and Environment, ACE, Becca Wolfson, the Director of the Boston Cyclist Union, Stacey Thompson of Livable Streets Alliance, Ken Krookemeyer, former Associate Commissioner for Highway Engineering for the State Department of Public Works, and Dr. Yvonne Lalira of Friends of Melnick Boulevard. And you all could go in any order, please introduce yourself, and then we'll do question and answer with this panel.
We might have to call them out.
All right, Dwayne, start us off.
Yeah, so good evening. I'm gonna keep it quick. This is about the health of our neighborhoods. This is about heat, air quality, and COVID. This is really about the life and death of residents. And any planning relative to this corridor and the streetscape have to remember that this is not a theoretical argument. We have proof that the environment our communities are living in are unhealthy, and COVID is the magnifying glass of that reality. Thank you.
Thank you. Becca?
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. Great. So for anyone who doesn't know, I'm Becca Wolfson, Executive Director of the Boston Cyclists Union. Thank you so much for chairing this meeting, for everyone who sponsored, and for everyone else who's here listening and asking great questions. A lot, I want to say that I spoke at the listening session back in September and shared a statement that the Boston Cyclists Union wrote, and I'll make sure that all counselors have access to that afterwards. A lot of what I'm going to say is in that statement as well. So, and I also want to thank the Friends of Melnia Cass. They've really been leading this conversation and invited us into it several times. So our office used to be close by on Dudley Street near Blue Hill Ave. This is a corridor that I would have biked, that many people would bike, and I'm involved from the bicyclist perspective, and also pedestrian access and safety, and access for all. We've been currently the two-way bike path on the northeast side of the corridor is not comfortable. I don't use it. Many people choose not to use it, but a significant reason is that there are tree roots coming through the path that, if you're riding along, would eject you pretty high into the air. And that's something that could be improved by rehabbing the existing path, not digging up the entire corridor, cutting down so many mature trees, and creating a new path on both sides that just isn't needed. So as far as the bike facilities are concerned, I want to be very clear, speaking on behalf of the Boston Cyclists Union, our members, people who bike, the bike community is not standing up and saying, we need this project to go forward and need it to go forward as is for bike access. There's never been unanimous consent around whether there should be a path on each side or one path on one side. There are destinations on both sides with tropical foods, the Orchard Garden School, and kids who do bike there, lots of housing on the other side, and a path there could open up access, for people who don't want to cross the street. But however, we said from the beginning, if you're going to put a path on both sides, each one should be two-way, so people don't have to cross multiple times. And so for the city to go from one two-way path to two one-way paths never made sense to us. And we continually voiced this concern, and it was never addressed. And what the city continually said with this design is that it was a compromise plan. But I think the compromises that are being made are too many and are for the wrong reasons. And we've continued to uplift the ask by the community to save the trees. And along with improving the bicycle safety and bike facilities, again, Chief Osgood showed this is a very dangerous corridor for all road users. It's a high crash corridor for pedestrians and for motorists. And yet the fact that the city is using the language that a tree hearing is not required, but they're making a concession to allow it because this is formally a street widening project, is counter to all Vision Zero principles. Making a street wider makes it more dangerous. So it just doesn't make sense. You can still table the intersections at Albany and Washington. You can still raise the crosswalks and can still improve sightlines without straightening the corridor, without widening the corridor, and without cutting down all of these mature trees. I want to just talk a little bit about street projects and tree removal. Mela already brought up the amazing example of the uproar that would ensue if the city ever proposed to remove even a single tree in Back Bay along the Comm Ave Mall. Another project example, the Arborway in Jamaica Plain, is being redesigned for safety for all road users. And at the start of that project, which is being run by the state, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, it's been widely said, we know that saving trees is a top priority, and we will avoid removal of a single tree at all costs. The difference with the Melnia Cass project in 2011, when it started, 400 trees were going to be cut down. In 2014, when the city came back with a revised plan, 240 trees were going to be cut down. And through the process, when the city made concessions and compromises, when that number became 62, the city, basically was able to gaslight the community and say, we were going to take down 240. We're only taking down 62 now. You should be happy with this result. And then I just want to say that the community is exhausted by process, and there have been so many meetings that people just don't understand how, what they mean, how they transpire. In November of 2018, there was a 25% design hearing that proposed removal of 62 trees. People were told this is much better than 240. But then since November of 2018 to now, somehow that number doubled to 120. The last thing that I'll say is the MEPA approval, the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, which is submitted to review the environmental impact of the project, was submitted at the 25% design hearing, which only included removal of 62 trees. So the environmental impact was analyzed at the removal of 62 trees, which has now gone up to 120. So appreciate the council calling this hearing, listening to everyone, and really doing everything to stop the removal of these trees and listen to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Becca. Next on my list was Stacy.
Thanks, Counselor, and thanks to the council for holding this meeting. I am also going to try to be brief tonight. And I would just say, I am the executive director of Livable Streets. We do not represent the community. We are not leading this project. The community is leading this project, and they're all here tonight to tell you what's going on. I'm here with my hat as an advocate, and I want to sort of focus on, I think, some of the patterns and some of the process issues, and maybe ask some hard questions, but also suggest some paths forward, not just for this project, but for how the city does all kinds of projects like this moving forward. Livable Streets, through the leadership of our founding board member, Ken Kruckemeyer, has been part of this process in many different ways over the last 10 years. So one of my projects tonight was to go through memos starting in 2011. And so I pulled up the first memo, which is available on the city's website, that tells you what the community said in 2011. And what it says in this memo is that the current planning effort is taking place against a backdrop of increased development, and that there is concern about that. So where's the BPDA? Where is the focus on displacement? We've known this is a problem since, again, 2011. It's documented in the city's documentation on the website. One of the key ideas that came out of this meeting was to develop a set of early action steps that the city could take, including snow removal, maintenance, cleaning, traffic calming. Where are the early action items from 9 years ago, 10 years ago at this point? Top bullet point from the list of a successful Melnia Cass Boulevard would be a beautified and improved landscaping, mature trees kept. That is the top request from the community in this memo, again, on your website. And then goes into maintenance, snow removal, litter consistently removed, safe biking and pedestrian, a lot of just very basic improvements. And so I bring this up to say, I think it's good to hear that there will be another meeting, but as Becca has expressed, there is a decade of documentation where community members have made very clear, direct, achievable asks. And I think it's really important to do some of that work ahead of the next meeting. So like, what's the snow removal plan based on the feedback this year to make sure people can cross the road? If the city is going to move forward with some of these design options, can we use the Healthy Streets Initiative that has been very successful in downtown Boston to show the community what you mean by traffic calming, experiment, test, like what are the things we can do that actually speaks to the feedback that has already been received, responds and demonstrates what you're trying to do. Like that all seems very reasonable, achievable, and aligned with what you've already been asked for. A second thing that I just want to highlight and come back to, because it's the question of funding. It hasn't actually been clarified tonight if the city is planning on moving forward with using the state and federal funds and how that impacts the design. One thing that has happened through the process is that we've heard over and over again, well, it has to get through a MassDOT approval, so we can't do this or we can't do that. Do we need to use this money? Or I'm not saying we don't need the project. As we've seen, we have a floodplain issue. We need to deal with heat island issues, and we need to deal with safety. But do we need this money, and do we need to go through this process? And it's unclear to me what the city's approach is, and I think that's really important to understand before we go into the next meeting. And maybe there's clarity tonight. And I'm going to put this up against the Northern Avenue Bridge project, because my understanding is that we are actually giving up $10 million of federal funding in order to move that bridge forward, and that's $100 million of city funds. Flexible city funds. So we do have precedent in a white wealthy community to spend lots of money to do what I don't want and what most people don't want, but to do something and to give up money. And I could be wrong. I'm happy to be corrected. So where is that flexibility for Melnia Cass? Where is that we have the resources? We don't need the state. We're going to be strategic. I think that folks would like that clarity. I would love that clarity. And just to say, I think that we need to understand what the actual intersectional approach is going forward. I know that for many years, I was going back, there were notes from 2017 where friends were saying, can you please bring the Parks Department in? Can you please bring your peers in? And there was pushback internally. So I know you all are meeting internally, but who is the intersectional team that is going to deal with displacement, going to deal with environment, who makes decisions and about what? And can the public have that understanding before the next public meeting? I'm done with my process lecture. Thank you for having me. Thank you to everyone who has been doing this for more than a decade. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Stacey. That was really important. Ken. Hold on, I'm double checking my screen. Yeah, sorry. Now we can hear you. Go ahead,
you
Ken.
can hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Hi, this is Ken Krookemeyer. I'm a resident of the South End. I've been involved. I was asked to join Friends of Melnia Cass at the very beginning because I was there with the neighborhood when the plans were made to plant 1,194 trees along Melnia Cass Boulevard, where to locate it, where to put in the new housing, where to put the industry, where to do all of the things that make what is there today. Is it perfect? No. Does it need to have trees removed in order to make it better? Absolutely not. I think that's the really important point that needs to be made clear to the chiefs, who I think are still waffling on what's going to happen going forward. Stacey pointed this out, and it is really important that the council know, that everyone in the neighborhood know that the trees are not coming out, the project is not going forward, and that we are going to start a new process that will take the vision that Ivana Lyer and many others in Lower Roxbury have been pushing, which is the idea of a greenway that becomes a positive center of focus of activity along Melnia Cass Boulevard, and that will coalesce the various pieces of the city, the trees, the maintenance, the snow plowing, all the other things that have to happen to take care of that boulevard, and will coalesce the neighborhood in being involved in all those decisions and all of the work that has to do to keep the boulevard as being the center of Lower Roxbury. That neighborhood was cut in half by the plans to build the expressway, and it is essential that the legacy from now 40 years ago to plant those trees be enhanced rather than torn apart in allowing the neighborhood to regroup as an important part of this city in all the possible ways for the health of its residents and so forth. We haven't remembered the history of how we got to that tree planting very well in thinking about public participation. And to answer the questions that Councilor Janey has asked, that Councilor Asabi George has asked about how we can move forward, I want to remind people of the process that was used in the Southwest Corridor, where the meetings were held monthly with each of the different neighborhoods and as a joint meeting of all of the neighborhoods to make decisions in public about the development of the project. They were made by consensus, and they were done under a memorandum of agreement that was signed at the very beginning that said, all these folks will be involved and they will be there. If you're not there, you are not going to be heard. That also meant that the city had to be there. That also meant that the public agencies had to be there. That means that the consultants had to be there. That means that the neighbors had to be there and the advocates had to be there. And if they weren't there, then their voice was not going to get heard in the decision that was going to be made. And so it required everybody to be involved, and it required them to all agree, which meant that everyone had to listen to everybody else. The neighbors had full ability to be persuasive about the things that concerned them. And the engineers, quite rightly, had an opportunity to be persuasive about the things that they were trying to care for that were part of regulations or state law or whatever else it was. The funding had to be there. It had to all fit together. We're being told now that this is going on and maybe the chiefs will be ready to talk to the neighborhood sometime this winter. What's been going on since that announcement was made in August? I think we need to know. We need to understand how this process is actually going to involve people. The people who are there, the people who know the things that need to be known in order to design the right project. If they'd been listened to in 2011, we wouldn't have spent $4 million of city money doing this design that has gotten us to a point where we shouldn't be proceeding. We will have wasted that money. We will have wasted that time and energy, not only of the engineers and the city administrators, but of all the neighbors who've been fussing with this thing for all that period of time. Let me get to the point of, do the trees need to be cut in order to get safety? Because we keep hearing that. We have to cut down the trees in order to achieve the safety goals of the project. It's absolutely not true. And if the engineers had listened, they would know that that's true. The points, there are 3 points to talk to. The 2 one-way bike paths, I think Becca has covered that quite well, because you wouldn't choose to put a bike path right next to a roadway when you've already got one that's farther away and so forth. I won't go through those details. The protected intersection design, which is required by the nature of these 2 one-way bike paths, has not convinced the neighborhood that it's going to be any safer to get across from one side of Lower Roxbury to the other. In fact, the distances are increased enormously. Currently 55 feet to get from curb to curb becomes 93 feet to get from the height of the sidewalk to the height of the sidewalk on the other side of the road, having gone down to the street level, cross the bike path, through an island, cross the street, through another island, cross the bike path, and then back up to the sidewalk on the other side. The time that it'll take to do that is longer than the full cycle of walk and flashing don't walk that is given. It doesn't even meet the state's, the national standards, MUTCD, for crossings How can that be safer? And you'll have to push a button, which was promised that you wouldn't have to push a button, but the traffic engineers took it out. There's so many examples of how this protected intersection is not going to work, is not going to be maintained. It has puddles if you look at it on Commonwealth Avenue Phase 2. It just is a mess. And so why are we spending all this money to create the mess? To believe that they're going to be able to lay asphalt within 1/8 of an inch tolerance in order to keep it so it will drain properly. It won't. Finally, the road will be safer if the traffic moves slowly, more slowly. Everybody agrees on that. And yet there is nothing in the design that couldn't be done within the existing curbs and without cutting a single tree. So if they're going to have new traffic signals, if there's going to be automatic recall, if there's going to be a 20-mile-an-hour progression, safety at Orchard Gardens School, they should be installing the required slowing the traffic by the school, and yet they haven't even put that in the project, believe it or not. The curb radii could be made sharper as the neighborhood requested. They haven't done that. Albany Street could be made one way, which they first were going to do, but no, they said the trucks would be slowed down, so they couldn't make it one way, so the school children could get on the buses more safely. These are all indications of how the project, the things that should be done, can be done, but without cutting the trees. Let's work together on doing that. Let's get the city council and the mayor and the public agencies all to work together in a way that will make it possible to build that greenway, to use that as a goal for everybody to work together positively in the future. We've got to do it by saying no to the existing contract right now and then moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, Yvonne.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to explain my views and what I think of the neighborhood and where we should be going. We thank you, Ken. Thank you, Becca, for being so direct about the flaws of this design. And at the heart of it, I think it's the community involvement and how the process has been done and how it continues to be done. I want to remind Mr. Osgood and Mr. Gupta and all the Boston Transportation Department that you are working for us. We are not working for you. You work for us. We pay your salaries. This is federal money. This is our taxes. This is our money that you're administering. So we need to be at the table and we need to be the first ones speaking, not you telling us what to do, which is what is still going on. You can't have meetings, closed meetings, and then come back with decisions for us. We want a community process. This is what we've asked from the very beginning. Ken has been very clear about how it was done with the Southwest Corridor. This can be done again. Now we have, and Luis also explained that we have the expertise. We don't need the city to hire experts to tell us how things should be done. We have the capacity here. We have people capable of making a decent design and something that responds to our needs and our concerns. So I just finished. I don't want to spend on my time, but I want to just read my statement because I think I'm too nervous. So for almost a decade now, city officials have added insult to injury by promoting a project that has only exacerbated the feeling of neglect that pervades our neighborhood. While we have to be confined during the epidemic, we lack the green space needed to relax and enjoy nature that other parts of the city have. Franklin and Fenway Parks, Carlson Beach, and the Arboretum are miles away. A new hotel, a supermarket, and an apartment building have already chipped away as the only open space and trees that we have along the boulevard. to mitigate the traffic congestions, the air contamination, and the noise pollution that continues to increase along the boulevard. I live 2 blocks from the boulevard, and I know what I'm talking about. The last thing we need is another construction project that pretends to improve our quality of life by attacking its key element, our tree canopy. But we have a dream. The Roxbury Greenway concept is a vision of what would be the new way, the new view from Columbus Avenue to Mass Avenue. It is the starting point of a process of healing and energy renovation dedicated to those who lost their homes, businesses, and neighborhood. The goals of the concept include, first, to reclaim and reconnect a neighborhood torn apart by a highway plan. 2, to offer a green respite from the urban heat island by preserving and expanding the existing tree canopy, shrubs, parks, and gardens, and fountains, I hope. 3, to provide green jobs and job training. We have a tremendous amount of capabilities here from people who come from the South who know how to deal with vegetation in gardening and growing food. Who knows, maybe we will need to grow foods in the city. 4th, to build neighborhood climate resilience. We can use the land that we have to build swells for the flood, for water absorption. We can have solar panels above those parking lots that we have along the boulevard. And we can have, we can offer, this is the 5th element, to offer historical content by means of monuments, dedicated parks, and art. For example, as can be seen, I gave the, I hope you all have this. This is the map of the Greenway. Here, Mr. Osgood, you can see it. I sent it to the organizer of the hearing, so you all have it in your materials. That we can see that there is the Frederick Douglass Monument that we have been working on for years, the Peace Garden. There is the Chuck Turner and Mel King Park. We can have the Sterling Street Park, or whatever name we want. There it is. Here you can see it. Thank you so much. So you can see the, oh, now I can see my speech. Whoops. For a second. You can see the Melnykas Park and Gateway to Nubian Square. And we can use all those empty lots that are now slated to be given to developers to build who knows what. We know housing that is not going to be affordable for people from the neighborhood. And we could just keep those parcels open and plant more trees instead of taking trees down. And the 6th point is to prevent further harm. This neighborhood has suffered a lot from what happened so many years ago. So I want to reiterate the message of my neighbors and friends. The Melnykas Boulevard redesign project must be halted, scrapped completely, and start all over, with community voices heard, and the building of a Roxbury Greenway should start. And I'd say, let's start working on it now. Vive la résistance, and we continue en la lucha. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you to all of our community panelists. I'll turn it over to counselors for questions now, starting with President Janey.
Thank you so much. So I just want to start with my deep, deep gratitude to all of the panelists, certainly the earlier panel, and most definitely the panel we just heard from. There was so much rich information. I mean, you covered the history, There were a lot of good nuggets in terms of solutions, and that's really where I would like to focus. And I heard, I mean, there were so many, there were different panelists obviously representing different organizations. And while there was some similarities and lots of shared goals and values that I heard, I wonder if there is like one document that really captures all of your concerns or all of your ideas rather than these multiple documents from each of the organizations. Does that exist? Is that something that you guys are working on?
Well, we do have a packet that was submitted to everyone, I believe, today.
Okay.
And I'm sure that can be boiled down into one document.
Thank you. Yes, I think that is helpful. Like as we go into the next phase, wherever the city is, and you know what I've asked of the earlier panel is that they open up this planning, that it isn't just internal chiefs, to make sure that we do get the expertise from the community, and we know that we do have talent and capacity to do this work, and that people have lots of good ideas. And so I think the best way to incorporate those ideas and making sure that we get a better design moving forward is by having those voices right at the table in the onset. I didn't hear clearly, I mean, a clear commitment for that earlier. I mean, I heard a commitment to community engagement, but I didn't hear a commitment to, we are going to open up this internal work group and make sure that there were voices on that. So I would suggest that there's more advocacy needed. I think it's really important that we get folks on the inside as the designs are being planned, so that we can incorporate all of the wonderful ideas that we heard from this panel in the next design. Madam Chair, I don't have many questions. I wanted to kind of get a sense of, and I will take a closer look at the document, the packet that was submitted that has the information that Nina just mentioned to see what that is. But I really want to make sure that we're getting these. There was so many good ideas and solutions that many of you mentioned, that we have that kind of in one place, that we can get that to the folks on the inside, and hopefully make sure that they get that information with some of you. So it's not just a document that they get, but actual folks who will be part of that planning process. Madam Chair, I'm really grateful for the opportunity. I know there are a lot of people who are still waiting to speak, so I will yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, President Janey. Councilor Mejia.
Yes, I am going to yield a little bit of my time, but I do just have some very specific questions, and I'd like to just kind of feed off a little bit about some of the things that President Council Janey was talking in reference to in terms of the coordination. I always say that Boston is resource rich, but coordination poor. And this is an opportunity that presents itself as a way for us to really bring two very different opposing views to the table to really plan as a collective, right? So that not everyone's having their siloed conversations, but that we feel a full sense of engagement and that all voices are being heard. And I'm not sure, I'm late to this particular party, so I don't know what the process was beforehand, but I think moving forward in terms of a restorative justice kind of circle, I think that this presents itself as an opportunity for the city to be really intentional about not having sidebar conversations with different groups, but really being transparent about what they're learning from different folks, and then bringing these groups together to really come to some consensus. I think that that's what these times require. And that's, I think, something that, feeding off of what Council President Janey mentioned, I think it's something that the city should consider doing. And I'm also curious about, Nina La Negra mentioned earlier about who is at the table in terms of the Molina cast. I mean, I made an assumption about who was at the table. I automatically thought that, you know, we were all there somehow. But I was really surprised to hear that the makeup of it. So I think that we need to reevaluate who are the friends of Molina cast. And if that information is public, and if it is, I'm sure I can Google it and find it. But if it's not, what opportunities exist for us to reevaluate who's at the table, and then really thinking about those folks who are usually not as engaged. To some of the points that we've heard before in terms of community engagement, there are those folks who always show up for every protest and every public hearing and every civic engagement meeting. And then there are people who are deeply impacted, don't even know that these things are happening around them. So I think that the city, in terms of community engagement, we really need to look at these sign-in sheets to see how many of these people actually live in the immediate neighborhood. So it's not just a room full of people who have absolutely nothing to do with this particular area, but they just might be on opposing sides in terms of advocacy groups, which is great to have advocacy groups, but we can't do so in a way that alienates those who are like in the immediate neighborhood. So I would offer that in terms of really taking stock of who's at the table and then doing our due diligence to have a record and an accurate accounting of those folks. And then this question is for whoever, community members. I'm just curious, how has the city reached out to your organization to design this new proposal? And what has your experience been like with the city? I'm just curious about what that level of engagement has looked like and what feedback you could offer us. And I just want to give a quick shout out again to Chief Osgood. I sent your boss an email about how dope you are. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you staying here past the time to listen to the people. And I really want to just note that it's greatly appreciated. So could I hear from the community members in terms of your process with the city?
I'm sorry. I was just going to say really quickly that in response to the question asked by Councilor Mejia, that the way that things were is not the way things are, and that there is room at the table for plenty more. So I think I stated early in my comments that I'm grateful to interact. And as David said, it hasn't always been a smooth process. We've had some bumpy moments, but for the good. We work things out so that we have a common purpose that we're working toward a great end. And in terms of communicating with the city, until the three chiefs got involved, my only complaint, Mr. Osgood, and whoever else might still be here, is that we didn't hear anything back in terms of what was next. But before that, it was dreadful. It was just plain awful. We'd go to these horrific community meetings. We'd listen to endless detailed plans that created crossed eyes and glazed brains. And then only to discover that what we were told that, oh, everything's fine. But then at the end of the process, we've found out that everything wasn't fine. The whole 68 tree, the 120 trees, the whole no trees to 400 trees. I mean, it was just insane. So it really felt like, and the other thing I just wanted to raise is that the construction company that was hired is in violation of their contracts in other municipalities for cutting down trees that should not have been cut. So how could the city of Boston award a contract to these people that are in the suburbs and in New Hampshire? I mean, it was just very odd. So I've said enough. Others can say more.
No, we love everything that you have to say, Nina. So don't ever stop. I see somebody's hand up, and I don't want to. I want to be mindful of the rules. So I'll let Michelle, Councilor Wu, and I do have one quick follow up. So I think Ken had his hand up. Councilor Wu.
Yeah, am I on? Yes. Councilor Mejia, I would, having been involved with community participation for now 50 years in Boston, I would suggest that one of the preconditions for good involvement of a neighborhood is that the agency or the people you're dealing with in the public sector, in this case, the city of Boston, is showing good faith to get people to be willing to come out to meetings, to make the time, to get involved. To have made promises 9 years ago, as Stacy mentioned, about the things they would do right away to take care of the trees, to plow the bike path, to fix it so that it wasn't bumpy, to take care of the lights rather than take them down when they weren't working and eliminate them along the bike path, for instance. If the city hasn't met its basic obligations to take care of the roadways, sometimes you get people to say, things are so bad, I'm really going to turn out. And other times you're going to get people to say, I've had it, I don't care. The city just isn't doing anything, I'm not going to show up. And so it's hard to get people to go if they don't see good faith responded. It's hard to get them to show up if they've gone to a public meeting and said the project shouldn't proceed unless you do this, that, and the other. And then they know that the next meeting is coming up and they look at the drawings that are shown and none of their answers were solved. None of the problems that they described were solved. Why are they going to go to the next meeting? Well, maybe they're going to go because they're really mad, or maybe they're just going to say the hell with it. Yeah. And so the challenge is going to be on the city's part to do the work it should be doing.
Yep, I appreciate that. And then my last question before I get the little ringer, and I just kind of want to offer this really in terms of accountability and transparency. I think that this is a really great example of what it looks like when we are doing that follow-up publicly, and maybe even posting the minutes from that discussion that was had on our website, that there's a tracker and a way for us to follow something from beginning to end, but that there is a way to do it that communities can actually ask questions along the way. Just because a meeting is done with doesn't necessarily mean that the process has to be over. There needs to that ongoing communication, and not everything has to be through a hearing, but I just think that we need to put the infrastructure in place for constant community engagement, because we hear this everywhere that we go, that people don't feel heard or validated or seen. And I think that this is a great opportunity for us to fix that system so that our people can really feel included in the process. So I really do appreciate all of y'all. I see, Becca, you got your hand up, but Michelle Wu's the boss up in here. She'll let you know if you can talk. So
Go for it, Becca.
Thank you. Yeah, I sort of want to respond to one of your questions, Councilor Mejia, about the process and communication and how have community voices been a part and how could they be? And I think there are many members of the Friends of Melnia cast who could also speak to this, but since no one had spoken up yet, I want to make sure this is brought to this floor. So we had been brought, again, into conversations with the Friends, which was convened by Madison Park Development Corporation for a very long time. And there were some sort of closed door meetings with city staff and the consultants to give feedback. But at one point they got very contentious where the message was basically, we've given you enough, we're not making any more concessions. And I think the group got pretty disenfranchised at that point. So even though they were engaged, it wasn't, fully open to the public. There was a smaller group that was engaging, but were shut down. And so, we stepped out of the process at that point saying, there's going to be a one-way bike path on each side. We've said two-way, one-way, doesn't really matter. The group isn't budging on the trees, and it doesn't feel like we really have any outlet anymore. And so, I'd say one of the staff who is managing that is no longer on with the city, and it sounds like Chief Osgood's involvement, the listening now might improve that. So I hope it does improve, but again, a lot of residents who did show up were very disenfranchised. And one example of how we can move forward better, to your point of having voices who have access and their city accountability, an idea that came from the Friends that I'm just repeating, to Yvonne's point of having this greenway and really celebrating the space and creating resident ownership. The Southwest Corridor has something called the MAB PAB, or sorry, that's the wrong, I can't remember the acronym anymore, but it's a group of residents who live along the corridor, who are representative of the community, who have access and either monthly or bi-monthly meetings where they bring things from the community to the state officials and things actually get done. They move things forward together. So the group had a vision for, this Roxbury Greenway to have something similar. And I think that would be really great and a great way to have open communication and a positive voice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You good, Councilor Mejia?
Yeah, because we got other people. I'll come back for my last round. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Braden? She might have stepped away.
Madam Chair, I'm still listening. Please keep going. I'm listening, and I want the local advocates to get lots of time to express.
Got it. I have my instructions. Thank you. Councilor Sabi George, do you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have questions. Just continue to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I'll double back for any others from President Janey or Councilor Mejia, and then we do have a number of folks left for public testimony as well. You good? Okay, President Janey is good. Councilor Mejia? Okay, all right, we will.
Oh, wait, so are we gonna get to ask more questions? I thought we were gonna do public testimony.
We're gonna wrap up this round of questions and then finish the rest of public testimony.
Okay, so then I do have one more question. It's about Black arborists, and my mentor in the small business, who I actually am chairing now, the small business she once did. She always, Councilor Janey is always talking about the importance of minority businesses in all aspects of the conversation. I just want to bring this in as something for us to consider, Chief Osgood, is that as you think about these contracts and these opportunities, that I'd like to see more Black arborists. I know we have some in the city of Boston that can help maintain these trees. I also know that we have an opportunity to hire young people so that we can teach young people at a younger age about how important it is for them to care about their environment and the trees. So I think with these 124 trees, regardless of what happens, I think that we have an opportunity to really bring in some young people and create financial opportunities for Black arborists in the city of Boston to help care for these trees. So that's just an advocacy thing that I wanted to just propose. And thank you again to the panelists who have spoken today.
Thank you very much, Councilor Mejia. And thank you so much to this panel. We are so grateful for all your time tonight and many years, nearing a decade of advocacy. Okay, we will move over to finish up public testimony from those who have been waiting so patiently to testify live, and then we'll play video testimony that was submitted beforehand. So the order that I have is, okay, I'm checking to see against who is here still. Kay Matthews will be followed by Carol Blair, Ms. Tamika Williams, who I'm gonna add to the Zoom room. And okay, we already did Mr. Singleton. Okay, let me check Michael Lane. Oh, I think Michael Lane probably is Michael Kane, actually. Okay, and then I'll scoop back through the room after this batch of public testimony. So, Ms. Matthews.
Hello, good evening, and thank you, Councilor Wu. Thank you, Councilor Janey. Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for having this hearing tonight. I am Kay Matthew. I've worked in Nubian Square for over 10 years, and I was one of the original members of Friends of Melnia Cass Boulevard way back in at the end of 2011, 2012, when we first started realizing that this wasn't a complete streets project after all. It was a road widening project that Boston Transportation Department was planning. So I'm going to keep this really short because a lot of what I was going to say has been said during this evening very eloquently, although I do want to point out that I too am disappointed in what I have heard Chief Osgood and Chief Cook talk about, what they've said tonight. As an example, the pledge to hold a tree hearing is not reassuring. It's kind of scary. It means that they're not hearing us when we say we don't want the trees removed at all. I'm going to go to a list of what many of us of Friends of Milne Cass Boulevard have been talking about in terms of our vision of next steps and what should happen in the future. First, the neighborhood must sit at the decision-making table. I think we've discussed this tonight throughout. Cancel the construction contract. Stop the project. Preserve the entire tree canopy along Milne Cass Boulevard. Designate Milne Cass Boulevard as a greenway. Design and install safety features that do not require any tree removal, and institute a long-term maintenance plan with citizen oversight. I think those are the steps, and I think that we would ask the counselors to be our allies in helping to realize these as next steps in the future.
Thank you.
2 minutes already?
Yes, sorry, Ms. Matthews, you can feel free to finish your thought.
All right, really quickly, just to say that it is such an irony that the city is committed to addressing climate change. And as we talked about already, Lower Roxbury is the most severe heat island, according to the city's own Climate Ready report. That the city has made a commitment to contend with climate change, but the removal of an urban tree canopy in the middle of a most severe heat island doesn't count. It doesn't make sense. It's irony. And we're all aware of the benefits of an urban tree canopy. Lower Roxbury can have safe streets and environmental justice. It's a false dichotomy for anyone to say we can only have one at the cost of the other. All it takes is will, and that's what my mother would always say, where there's a will, there's a way. And I hope the counselors will stand alongside us as we go forward, onward.
Thank you.
That's this issue.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give folks who are testifying now at the end a little more wiggle room because you've waited more than 2 hours to testify. So thank you so much for sticking with us. Next was Carol Blair, then Tumikwa and Michael. Oh, Carol, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Carol Blair. My neighbors and I live in the Lower Roxbury Heat Island. During this COVID time, my husband and I walk every day, often looping the full length of Milne Cass Boulevard. This is our Commonwealth Avenue Mall. 10 years ago, BTD walked the area with neighborhood leaders and transportation advocates. On a scorching hot day, we moved from one shade tree to another. Over 10 years, the community has said, don't cut the trees. With the perseverance of Friends of Milne Cass Boulevard, the engagement of our city council, and the leadership of the mayor's chief of equity, we now have one more chance. After all that's been said, here's what I want to add. In 1971, I landed a summer job in the planning division of Vermont's Highway Department. Studying civil engineering at the University of Vermont, I was eager to begin my transportation career, helping people move through their days and their lives. I joined 7 men in a big room of drafting tables, laying out Interstate 89 through central Vermont. They lived in the area. They knew the land and the community. As they flipped French curves and compasses over maps layered with yellow tracing paper, they talked. What if we follow the ridge here and then come down to the river, or stay high with a long bridge? The design for MCB has been very different, compartmentalized, privatized, and computerized. The layout plows through mature trees and established root systems. It takes away park for strips between salted paths. It realigns the road, requiring major reconstruction. Friends of MCB have proposed improvements within the existing layout. Let's get some tracing paper and play with this. Let's talk about the pros and cons. Let's work together to figure out how we can have both trees and safety. And let's reconnect the community. We want the Greenway. And I should say, after listening to the various testimonies tonight, I think until we all get in the room together, we haven't agreed on the facts. We're not going to get to agreement before we agree on the facts. Things like the tree canopy, Roxbury versus Lower Roxbury. Things like the crash statistics. Are we including the Mass Avenue intersection, which is apparently not included in this contract? Things like how much hardscape. What are we playing games with the hardscape data? Because I understand there's actually more surface area, more paved surface area, and maybe we're thinking about the pervious. I don't know, but we need to agree on the facts. So thank you for listening, and I hope we soon get to the table together.
Thank you, Carol. Ms. Williams?
Hi, my name is Tamiqua Williams. I live near the Boulevard and reside in the area for over 20 years. I and other concerned residents do not wish to be experimenting on. We want you all to cancel the project that has been going on for nearly a decade and listen to our voices that we want this project canceled and that we want the Greenway. Residents that live amongst concrete and brick buildings will have no protection once you remove these beautiful mature trees that mitigate the heat island. And we all know that this area is 10 degrees hotter than the outer skirt communities. Therefore, this is inequitable. We want equal protection. We want protection for the trees. It is unjust to remove 100 trees in this neighborhood. And it is a disgrace to the legacy of Melnia Cass and the families that lost their homes through eminent domain. I have attended meetings, prior hearings, and requested that the apartment buildings along the boulevard receive notification and that these meetings be advertised in the Bay State Banner. That did not happen again. And so we have no good faith in this process, and we ask that you all cease and desist and that we build upon our community guidelines for Greenway. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael? And Michael is going to be followed by James Simon, Kyle Robidoux, Lisa Beatman, and Sarah Freeman.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. Thank you to the council for having this important hearing. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Mass Alliance of HUD Tenants. We've had tenant group members in Lower Roxbury for many years. We do civic engagement there each year as well. So I'm very familiar with the neighborhood. And we've voted to endorse the goals of this remarkable coalition of community groups. I think it's pretty clear that there's not a lot of support for the city's plan. It should be withdrawn. The only arguments I really heard from the city were, well, gee, we've got 25 million bucks from the feds, and so we have to spend it. And we've spent 4 million on this current plan. Well, the current plan is lousy and it should be withdrawn. That's a classic example of the sunk costs argument. You know, we spent money on a terrible idea, therefore we have to keep spending more money. Instead, take that 25 million, set it aside for the community greenway plan, spend it on more trees, replacing the trees that already have come down and put in building that wonderful plan of green canopy that Yvonne was presenting with a community-led process like Ken described that worked for the Southwest Corridor. I was part of that back in the 70s, that the community stopped some lousy plans and came up with a good one that everybody celebrates. So that can be done here. Money can be spent on trees, fixing the current bike path, making that a little better, maybe having another one on the other side. I'm not clear, both should be 2 ways, but you certainly should not widen the street and then put a bike path in the middle of the street, which would be clearly dangerous. That's the, frankly, dumbest idea I've heard about this yet. So let's walk away from the bad plan, invest in these remarkable community leaders who've come up with a better solution and make that work. One other thing to mention, this could be the opportunity to rename Columbus Avenue. And I would propose that we rename the Roxbury part Chuck Turner Way and the South End part Mel King Way. That would be a capping stone to make the Greenway plan really serve the past, present, and future of the Lower Roxbury community.
Thank you very much. Jane? Miss Simon? Okay, we'll skip, but just speak up if you are interested in testifying. Kyle? Let me see if Kyle is still here. Oh, okay, I'm gonna ask Kyle to unmute.
All right, I'm good, right?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thank you to all the counselors for organizing this meeting and the city folks who are still on and were on before. My name is Kyle Robidoux. I live in Lower Roxbury. I can see Melania Cass from my front door. And I was on the board of the United Neighbors of Lower Roxbury when that group met and had meetings in the neighborhood. And for years, actually 5 or 6 years, I walked Melania Cass, my daughter, to school at Orchard Gardens. And I continue during non-COVID times to commute to Ruggles Station using Melania Cass. And I just wanted to echo all the comments previously about this being a racial and social justice issue. But I'd also like to add that for me personally, this is also kind of a disability rights and accessibility issue. As someone who is visually impaired and uses a white cane to travel along Melania Cass, it is incredibly difficult for me both to move on the sidewalks, navigate them, navigate all the pushed up bricks and the unevenness of it. I also shop and frequent Nubian Square, and so crossing Melania Cass, the traffic light patterns, particularly the ones in Washington Street, which never seems to work, are really, really challenging. So for me, I want to figure out a way for this community to move forward and reap the benefits of these infrastructure improvements. I don't necessarily want that on the backs of kind of the racial justice issues that folks talked about earlier, but I do feel like for me, there's got to be a middle ground where we can try to figure out ways to make these improvements, make things healthier and better for our community, make it easier for folks like myself and bikers and walkers of all backgrounds and abilities to be able to move along Melania Cass. And trying to figure out what is that median ground. So I know that I would be excited to kind of participate in a process moving forward, with the city and my neighbors and elected officials and so forth to kind of make this happen. And I do remember being at that meeting in 2011 and thinking about what a victory it was to get the BRT to come off the table. So I do appreciate the city's willingness to compromise. And I also feel like now is the time to really kind of seize this opportunity and push forward. And I'd be very much looking forward to working with my neighbors and others on that. And thank you again for holding this space and for all the folks who shared their comments and their time beforehand and afterwards as well.
Thank you very much. Lisa Beatman. Lisa?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, now we can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't want to take much time here. Sorry, I'm not in good lighting. I want to heartily support all of the activists, the advocates, the tree advocates that have spoken today. My name's Lisa Beatman. I am co-leader of the Mount Hope Canterbury Neighborhood Association in Eastern Roslindale and American Legion Corridor Coalition, which is another essentially boulevard that has also in need of remediation for similar reasons. So as has been mentioned, there are many whiter, wealthier neighborhoods in the city, outside the city, that seem to have been able to both preserve their green space and other natural assets, have safe streets, at the same time and have appropriate development. And I think it's very important for the city to really have an environmental and social justice lens on remediating that situation in the environmental justice neighborhoods in Boston. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And last but not least, Sarah Freeman.
Hi, I actually don't have a comment as much as a request. If Ken Kruckemeyer is still on, I think he might have been a little subtle by sitting in front of some visuals. Is Ken still here? And if he wanted to talk about that graphic, I think that would be informative.
Maybe
Not to put you on the spot, but thank you.
Out of the.
Thank you. Okay, 2 minutes, Ken, since you're getting donated some public testimony time.
But this map is a portion of the length of Melniacas Boulevard, which is twice as long, which shows in red the trees that will be cut along Melniacas. This is a section from the middle of Madison Park. Oh boy, it's hard to do this. Housing to about Albany Street, that shows in red the trees that get cut, in yellow the trees whose roots are threatened by being in the critical root zone, and green the trees that remain according to the 100% drawings that are done, that have been bid, and what the contractor is expected to do. So it's important to realize that virtually all the trees along Melniacas are impacted by the project, and many of them will go in red and just a few would remain in green. It's impossible for me to believe that a good engineer won't come up with a scheme that could accomplish the things that they try to do without cutting this many trees. In fact, what I tried to say in the testimony was that you can do virtually everything without cutting any of the trees, except perhaps the two-way bike path in all of the blocks. Nevertheless, we think the right way to solve this problem is stop the project and get on with making the greenway that Yvonne has described.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for pointing out that this is a way of looking at the project that helps people understand just what devastation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken and Sarah. Okay, so that concludes the public testimony portion, and we will just offer city councilors a chance to make a closing statement before both my kids tear apart this room. Madam President, if you would go first, please.
Thank you so much. And many thanks to Cass and Blaze for their patience as we have their mom chairing this hearing. You know, I know a lot of folks have expressed their disappointment, and I understand why that is, but I am leaving this hearing feeling really encouraged. I just hear the incredible talent that is among us in our community. I hear the passion, I hear the commitment, and I hear real solutions to a challenge. And I think that is really important. As people have already stated, you know, this is a racial justice issue, it's an environmental justice issue, it is a disability rights issue, and people have pointed out the importance of the table. As I said earlier, I would really like to see this process opened up. I know there are other projects that we've done in the city where we've created task force or work groups that involve members from the community. I'd like to see that happen here. People have called for a halt. I support that 100%. This needs to be reimagined, just like many of the other things in our city. As we think about decision-making tables, I'm a broken record on this. Decision-making tables must be diverse. They must include the voices, because who is at the table determines not only what is served, but who gets to eat. And right now, our people are starving and we need to make sure our folks get to eat. I want to take the remainder of my time just to go through the quick thank yous. Certainly to all of the panelists. I want to especially thank Yvonne and Kim. I want to thank the Friends of Malnia, ACE, Speak for the Trees, Livable Streets, the Boston Cyclists Union. Many thanks to Luis Elisa and Nina La Negra. Special thanks to Chief Cook, Chief Crockett, Chief Osgood. Certainly to all of my colleagues for being here. I think, again, there are lots of great ideas. One of the things I would like to just leave us with to keep us grounded is bring Ms. Cass back into the space. And I know many people referenced her this evening. As we talked about the history, as we talked about systemic racism in our city, and as we talked about what we need to do going forward, because we're not going back. We can't go back. We have to go forward. We have to go better. So I want to leave us all with this quote, particularly those of us who work in city government, my colleagues and the administration. This is a quote from Melnia Cass herself. And she says, "I am convinced that my life belongs to the whole community. And as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. For the harder I work, the more I live." Let us, as elected officials, as public servants, as the mayor's team, let us all take those words to heart and make sure that we are doing what is right and just for this community. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your partnership on this issue. Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for your partnership on this issue. And many thanks to everyone who is still on the Zoom, everyone who has been on the Zoom, everyone's watching, and all of the folks who have offered amazing testimony and great ideas that I think move us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. I messed up the order of things, and Candace was reminding me we didn't do video testimony, so that was my fault. But let's close out the live speaking portions, and then we can all sort of watch at our leisure while we're eating and stuffing our faces and off camera. And we'll make sure to get that public video testimony in there as well. So we'll do Councilor Mejia, and then I know a rep from the Attorney General's office, and then Chief Osgood also wanted a final word, and then video. Councilor Mejia.
Thank you. So I'm going to echo the thanks that Councilor President Janey already offered. I echo all of those thank yous, so no need to go through the list because you all are thanked in my book, okay? But I also wanted to just also underscore the importance for me in being a co-sponsor of this hearing, but really creating an opportunity for me to really listen and learn. And to Councilor Janey's point in terms of like the real solutions already lie here. And if we take a moment to step back and really listen to the people who are living the realities and doing the work, then we can get to a place where everybody really feels heard and valued. And so this is what I witnessed here tonight. And I'm really excited to see the movement. The real question that I'd like the administration to really consider is that this is not just another checkbox that we did this hearing and that we nodded our, that we, yeah, right? But like that we're gonna hold ourselves accountable to what we heard in this space and halt this project and create a real community-centered approach to discussing this redesign in a way that feels collaborative and that feels like we are making an effort to ensure that all means all voices are heard. And that includes making sure that not just through public hearings, through community conversations, through civic association meetings, but that we're also doing a little bit of door knocking and including those folks who don't come out to any of these events, because we have to also recognize here, even in this space, there's a lot of privilege for folks who have access to the internet, folks who know how to speak this language, and who are able to fully participate. So my charge to the administration is, as you start thinking about your communication and your outreach plan, that you do your due diligence to include and work in collaboration with the neighborhood office and the Office of Neighborhood Services to do some door knocking, to get some real live feedback from people through surveys. And so that we are really doing everything in our power to making sure that all voices are heard. I would, as an at-large city councilor, offer our social media platform to help you with that, to reach the masses, and to help you all, every single organization that's here, to help you all support and amplifying your voice, because we continue to work in silos and everybody talks about each other, not with each other. And so I want to be able to be a partner with you all in this process for the redesign of the redesign. So we're pausing it, or at least I'm encouraging you all to pause it and then include the people who are here in the process of redesigning what that next level of engagement is going to look like. But I hear from the people, and I think that it was loud and clear that we cannot move forward with this project as is, and everything needs to be put on pause until people feel heard. And so thank you again, all the chiefs, but big shout out to you, Chief Osgood, because you stayed and we really do appreciate being heard. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. David, and I so apologize. You weren't on my list for some reason in terms of testimony, and I know the Attorney General's advocacy has been very instrumental in affecting this project and the outcome here as well. So thank you for representing the office, and please take whatever time you would like.
Thank you, Chair Wu. Thank you, Councilors Janie Mejia and the rest of the councilors and the chiefs and the community members. My name is David Wittenberg. I'm an Assistant Attorney General here on behalf of Attorney General Maura Healey. I work in the Energy and Environment Bureau, and I just wanted to share some of the our office's thoughts and advocacy in this area. As we all know, the city of Boston is disproportionately affected by climate change, not just because of its proximity to the coast, but because of the heat island effect. Our most vulnerable residents are often the hardest hit. So it's not just that these mature canopy trees cast shade to reduce radiant energy, but they can also cool an entire city block by releasing water vapor through a process called evapotranspiration. And as we all know, heat-related death disproportionately affects people of color in the United States, which is an inequity that, if it's unchecked, will only worsen as the climate continues to change. Someone mentioned earlier that COVID is an issue here, and I agree. When the health disparities driven by poor air quality have never been greater, the tree's ability to remove air pollutants, including NO2, ozone, and even PM 2.5, which is fine particulate matter, have never been important. And COVID-19 vulnerability has been tied closely to environmental quality, specifically air quality. You could extrapolate this to other issues that affect respiratory health issues that affect Black and Brown communities more, such as asthma. Our Roxbury constituents have long been exposed to dangerous levels of air pollution that exceed those, as we know, found in more affluent and white communities, in part because of the industrial facilities and highways that are heavily concentrated in low-income communities and communities of color. So these disparities exist within the city of Boston. There's a really interesting recent study that I wanted to share from the Boston University School of Public Health, which considers the potential health and associated economic benefits of the city's groundbreaking Carbon-Free Boston report. So essentially this study says, okay, what if we run the numbers on this? What if we eliminated all human-generated anthropogenic carbon emissions in the city of Boston? What would be the health effects tomorrow? And what it found was that it would have a co-benefit of reducing PM 2.5, reducing ozone concentrations across the entire greater Boston region. It would result in a net decrease in cardiovascular and respiratory illness and death, both morbidity and mortality, right? The severity of illness and also death, but that these health benefits would largely be conferred on communities of color. Maintaining these mature tree canopies and mature tree planting in low-income communities and communities of color is one way to mitigate the environmental injustice that these communities face. I'd also like to speak a little bit about equal access to green space. So Massachusetts is lucky to be the 8th most tree cover out of any state in the country. We have about 62% of Massachusetts is covered in forest. What does it mean when those forests aren't available to people in the city of Boston? What does it mean when those forests aren't available to low-income communities and communities of color. Nature obviously leads to improved mental health, lower stress levels, can lead to enhanced cognitive skills. And these mature trees, represent a generation of mitigation since the defeat of the Inner Belt Highway Project that have helped this boulevard, as we've heard tonight, blossom into a benefit for Lower Roxbury residents, particularly pedestrians and cyclists. So I just really think it's important not to, set aside the aesthetic benefit, right? So in other words, we don't just want trees in Millennium Park or in Franklin Park or on the Esplanade, but in the neighborhoods. So we're really thankful that the city has, to begin with, begun to reconsider this plan. I think we're also appreciative that the city plans to replace removed trees with newly planted trees. But as we've spoken about tonight, the mature canopy trees, are much more effective at all of these environmental and health effects than smaller new trees. And the new trees obviously will take a generation to grow. So we have a few other policy proposals. I think we'd like to see as many trees as possible preserved on Melnia Kess Boulevard. But I think some other policy proposals that we've come up with include new tree plantings in other city heat islands with a focus on Dorchester, Mattapan, and East Boston, which has the least canopy cover of any neighborhood in the city. A vacant lot assessment by DND and BPDA, and look at dedicating unbuildable lots, particularly in the areas surrounding Melnia Kess, to tree cover. And then considering expanding the legacy tree program into a more full-bodied heritage tree ordinance to identify and protect these categories of trees, providing significant neighborhood benefits. So a gentleman earlier tonight mentioned he lives along Seaver Street. And as you know, like when you make a left from Blue Hill Ave onto Seaver, there are these big, beautiful trees at the top of Franklin Park. But they have historically been undermanaged. And if we take a closer look at making the resources that we do have thrive, that's another way that we can impact these issues. I'll stop there. I know it's been a really long and sort of full-bodied night of conversation, but me and my team are happy to discuss any and all of these measures and any other issue with any members of the community, counselors, or the mayor's team.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and appreciate your patience.
Thank you.
And Chief Osgood.
I'll be really quick, which is really just to really thank everybody here. To thank Councilor Wu, Councilor Mejia, Councilor President Janey, all the folks who spoke both in public comment and in testimony on behalf of the entire administration. Thank you for being so engaged in this. I do want to really recognize that tonight, we heard not just sort of feedback on the plan, but repeatedly, to Councilor Mejia, your point, feedback on the process. And I do appreciate the fact that in order for us to have a plan that we're all proud of, we have to have a process we're all engaged in, and we hear that. And so I look forward to working on both the plan and the process on the days ahead.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, thank you, everyone. This will conclude the live portion. And Candace, if you could cue the video testimony, and please feel free to, everyone can just watch from their own screens and not necessarily on Zoom. And then I'll bring us back right after that just to close out and adjourn.
We can't hear it. I can't hear it. Can anyone else hear it? I can't hear anything.
We can't hear it.
Deberían de poner más.
There we go. Thank you, Candace.
Ok, mi nombre es Felicia Tocacio, vivo aquí en Russell Home y estoy en contra de cortar los árboles porque eso nos hace falta para respirar cada día. Y deberían de poner más árboles porque por alguna razón Dios están en el mundo, por alguna razón es porque se necesitan. ¿Entiendes? Porque hasta el mismo nieto mío, que es chiquititito, cortaron unos arbolitos ahí y dijo, no, esa gente está loca, eso lo necesitamos para respirar.
You want me to translate that?
Mi nombre es Ángela.
Oh, I can translate. Oh, how do you do that?
Maybe we should stop and let Yvonne translate.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. I had the written translation, but basically what she said is that she lives in Roxy Homes and that the trees are important because we need them to breathe, and that even her little grandson was so upset when the Roxy Homes took down some trees that they used to sit under on hot days to increase their parking lot. That's what she didn't say that, but that's what it meant. That her grandson got very upset about trees being taken down, and he said, "No, why are these people doing that? They're crazy. We need the trees to breathe." That was it. Thank you. It's emotional.
Ángela, mi nombre es Ángela. Yo vivo aquí en el 57 de la Windsor, en Mandela Home. Estoy en desacuerdo, como creo que toda la comunidad lo está, de que nos eliminen los árboles. Los árboles son muy importantes para nuestra comunidad porque eso evita que nosotros no oigamos tanto el ruido de las ambulancias, de la policía, de tantos carros y de la contaminación. Esta área es muy preciosa, esta área sin árboles no hay vida, y nosotros necesitamos todos esos árboles para que nosotros tengamos en el verano un poquito de fresco, porque si nos los quitan, nos vamos a estar solamente respirando gasolina.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, she said she lives in Mandela Homes on Windsor Street, and that she's in disagreement, as she thinks the rest of the community is, with taking down the trees on Meñacas, because they protect us from the noise from the road, and that we need them in the summer for fresh air, and that if the trees are taken down, we will be just breathing gasoline. So the trees ensure that the trees protect us from pollution and from the heat. I think that's what she said. Thank you. Next.
Sí, mi nombre es Mikey.
Ajá.
¿Y usted vive? Yo vivo aquí en el Melina Cas 600.
Dígame, ¿por qué son importantes los árboles de Meñacas Boulevard?
Bueno, los árboles son importantes porque, mire, si tú matas estos árboles aquí, ¿cómo la gente va? Para la gente pasar por aquí solamente pasa en árboles abajo de las matas, cogiendo fresco, cogiendo aire que no está cogiendo el sol puro. Si tú matas esto, mira cómo se ve la forestación bien linda. Si la deforan, ¿cómo se va a ver esto? Exacto. Se va a ver esto no sé, yo no sé cómo que piensan, si ellos piensan que van a hacer un bulevar. Digo yo. Sí, porque, pero los árboles son importantes, señores, para nuestras vidas, para nuestros hijos. Hay que mantener los árboles, mejor mantenerlos siempre, que en vez de tumbarlos, mejor que crezcan.
Gracias. Wow. Okay, so I forgot to say that last thing, that they both said that this area is beautiful. And he said, what would we do if we don't have the trees? People come here and they walk under the trees for the shade. If they took down the trees, what would be left? Nothing. And that we should, instead of taking down trees, we should plant some more. That's what he said. Sure.
Queremos que tumben los árboles, queremos más árboles. Más árboles, claro. Para eso es medio ambiente, y hablar, sembremos más árboles para que tengamos más medio ambiente, claro, más lluvia. Pues los árboles es parte de la vida, del ser humano, claro. Sin árboles no podemos vivir. Y la lluvia. Queremos que tú me los árboles.
He is a gardener, and he lives on Roxy Homes on Tremont Street. He said we need more trees because trees are essential for life. We need them for rain, and we just need more trees. That's what he said. Instead of taking down trees, we should have more, and that they're important for us and for our children and the future generations.
My name is Masha Jackson, and I'm a longtime resident living at Roxy Homes on Tremont Street, Roxbury, which is at the corner of Melnia Cass Boulevard and Tremont Street. Across the street stands St. Cyprian's Church. Your Department of Transportation has that big, beautiful tree in front of that church marked for removal. Along with that tree, you have several other trees on Melnia Cass Boulevard, all the way down to Mass Ave marked for removal. I, along with other concerned residents in the area, we want to know why. Many of those trees are not dead. They're fully matured and beautiful. They give off much needed oxygen and shade, which helps the environment. It has come to my attention that the roadway development project is supposed to include cutting down some dead trees and some healthy trees to make way for a bike path and some other things. Well, we don't want another bike path on the main street that's already heavily traveled by our automobiles. You and the city of Boston are destroying our neighborhood in the disguise of supposedly making upgrades of our community. And furthermore, Melnia Cass was a well-known activist for this community. That's why she had a boulevard named after her. I urge you, along with other concerned residents, to reconsider the environmental, economic, and public effects that losing these trees will have on a majority of the Black and Latinos community. You must put an end to the project as it is currently designed. All trees matter. I previously sent emails to all the Boston City Councilors about the issue. I thank Maggie Hirschland, who reached out on behalf of the City Councilor Campbell's team, which in turn directed me to Kim Janey of District 7 and to your website address. Respectfully, please save the green. All trees matter, Patrick Hoey. My name is Masha.
Yes, that's great.
My name is Carmen Storms, a 50-year resident of Roxy Homes. I've been here through the beginning of the growing of the trees. They're one of the most vital parts of our lives. They let us breathe, and also they give us oxygen, and they give us pleasure. Why are we trying to take down the trees? I said, if you take down the trees, it'll look like a destitute island. We're not going there. This is Roxbury. We love Roxbury. I said, this gives us pleasure. This is for the kids. This is for humanity. They're living. We're living. And we're living is somewhat in a better space because of the trees. We need the trees. Melnia Cass was a vital activist for this community. You will be destroying her hard work if you tear down the trees. You cannot. And it will not be accepted in Roxbury, Mr. Mayor. We've been trying so hard. I've done the walks. I banged on with pots and pans going up and down the street to save the trees. We don't need no bicycles. We have a bicycle route already. And let me say something to you. Half the community don't have bicycles. Who are we getting the bicycle lane for? It's not for the community. It's for outsiders who don't live here. I live here every day, and I see what the trees can do and are doing. They're letting us live and breathe. And I tell you what, you see me in this walker, I have my good days and my bad days. If you start anything, I will chain myself to a tree, and then what? You're gonna cut me down?
She's good.
My name is Joanne Williams, and I live
in the community near Melina Cast, and I want to save the trees because of the goodness that they bring oxygen and shade to, to us and stem off um, underlying disease like asthma, other things. Please, I want the trees to be saved.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Okay, is that all of them, Candace?
That is all of them.
Great, thank you so much. And sorry, I didn't realize some of them were multilingual and would need interpretation. So thank you so much, Yvonne, for stepping in and that you happen to be on. We will do better about that in the future and maybe even think about something like captioning ahead of time or something if we have the videos. So I just want to wrap up and conclude and say thank you so much for participating, for testifying, for following along. Obviously, this conversation will continue, and we've now heard some next steps from various groups and the administration. So in terms of this hearing, this will conclude the Boston City Council's Committee on Planning, Development, and Transportation hearing on docket number, I'm sorry, trying to find the actual number.
Madam.
Docket number 0984.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. This hearing is adjourned.
Gracias por todo.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Gracias.
Thank you so much.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for the help.
Yvonne, those are great videos. Thank you. Adios. Muy bonito. Gracias.